Good evening, and welcome to the Richmond City School Board work session, Monday, October 1st. Madam Clerk?
The board members who are present, please respond. Ms. Newell. Here. Mr. Barlow. Here. Ms. Gibson. Mr. Young. Here. Ms. Cosby. Mrs. Burke. Ms. Owen. Here. Dr. Sapini. Here. Ms. Page.
Here.
We have a quorum, Madam Chair. Our interpreter is here.
Buenas noches, si hubiera necesidad de un intérprete, estoy en la parte de atrás del fondo. Gracias.
Thank you, Ross. Next
The
item.
next item is 1.02, the adoption of the agenda. I have one amendment, and that is to remove item 5.01. Receive the comprehensive annual financial report ending June 30th. That's the only amendment, Madam Chair.
Need a motion?
I move that we approve the agenda as amended.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing that we have none, the agenda has been adopted, amended as presented.
The next item is 1.03, and that is to approve the minutes of the September 4th, 2018 school board meeting and the minutes of the special meeting of September 21st, 2018. Those minutes were given to you for your review, and they were also posted on board docs. We have not received any edits or corrections.
Need a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes of both meetings.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing that we have none, the minutes have been adopted as presented.
The next item is item 2, your public information. I have one speaker who signed up in advance. What is your pleasure, Madam Chair?
To allow the speaker that has signed up to come forward. And if we have other members in the audience, we ask that you come forward at this time to speak. If you're speaking as an individual, you have 3 minutes. If you're speaking on behalf of an organization, you have 5 minutes. So if it's an organization and you have one representative, then please allow that representative of that organization to come forward. So again, if you plan to speak during public information period, please come forward at this time. State your name and sign in. Thank you.
The person who signed up is Ms. Deonta Carter. Ms. Carter?
So if we have others in the audience that would like to come forward at this time, please do so.
Good evening, school board members. My name is Ainsley Perkins. Last Tuesday, I attended one of the school design meetings to review the exterior appearance options. I thought these meetings were for any community input. At this location, the meeting was oriented to the specific stakeholders, and they had met together the week before. They were welcoming, and I really appreciated their perspectives. One of the staff discussed the importance of ensuring there is office space for maintenance personnel, not just for all of their equipment, and how food service should have walk-in freezers and refrigerators. It was disheartening to hear that our 3-year-old Huguenot High was not designed with enough such storage, which results in food deliveries occurring twice a week instead of once a week. Several of the participants highlighted the importance of designated rooms, not classrooms, that would be utilized for specialized testing, private conversations with students and/or parents, and for the many community partners who work with the students during the day. This was valuable input, and I hope is already part of the design team's plan. This is an aggressive construction schedule, and I, for one, am concerned that it does not leave room for the inevitable weather delays, the additional build-outs that were not expected, or the plumbing electrical that takes longer than expected. Small issues become bigger issues when the schedule is not flexible. We want to be sure we get it right the first time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let the record reflect that you've been joined by Ms. Gibson and Ms. Cosby.
Good evening, school board. My name is Melinda Miller. I live at 3127 Glennon Drive, so I live on the south side. I'm here to discuss an issue or request that you consider an issue that affected me personally, but affects more students within the city of Richmond. I'm asking that you give consideration to taking a look at or a relook, because it's been looked at pretty continuously since school started, the school transportation hub system. The day before school started, while on vacation, I learned that my daughter, for myself, and the students within my community did not have a hub stop identified to transport to specialty school. They were in the Broadlock, Bouchard community, and they were being transported to Lucille Brown for the IB program at Lucille Brown. There was no hub stop identified. When a stop was identified, as a parent, I had some concerns regarding the issue of safety, as well as the issue of access. Many of the students in the community do not have access to, or rather their parents don't have access to reliable transportation. So in my opinion, it presents a disparity in who is able to apply to go to a specialty school and who is able to access transportation. If there's no transportation to get to a hub stop, then we have some gifted students that may not be able to participate in some of the specialty programs, as well as a safety concern. Many of the students actually have to walk from their homes to the hub stop locations, looking in terms of safety, in terms of we're approaching winter and fall and winter, daylight savings. I have some concerns about safety issues for our students. So I'd like to ask that you all consider taking a look at providing a more convenient transportation system to students in the city as related to the specialty schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing that we have no other members in the audience that would like to come forward at this time, this concludes the public information period.
The next item is item 3, board business. 3.01, discuss the health advisory committee.
And while you get the presentation, I'll introduce myself. My name is Drew Morrison. I'm the policy director of the City Health Department. And we have been working at the Health Department with Pasquini and with Liz Dorr on this project of reestablishing the School Health Advisory Board. So we've been putting in work for a few months and trying to sort of sketch out the edges here. And before we get too far down that road, wanted to come and update you all about sort of the scope of what a School Health Advisory Board reform for RPS would look like, and a little bit more about the context. So at the Health Department, thank you. At the health department, we obviously work with RPS on a number of initiatives. We do school health immunization and some wellness checks for kids entering kindergarten and entering 6th grade. We run adolescent health programs in middle and high schools. So this would sort of just be an extension and indeed a next step of that. That would be another way that the health district is excited to support what you all and what the administration is doing for youth in our city. So I'll be brief so that we can save time for any comments or questions that you might have. But during the presentation, what I'll try to do is review some context for a school health advisory board, or SHAB as it's short for, the purpose of a school health advisory board, how it might work, and some timeline stuff. So that's what we'll go through. So first, regarding sort of the context here, yeah, that's perfect. Or we can go back to the previous slide. That's great. Or previous. Perfect. Yeah. So a school health advisory board is certainly not something that we at the City Health Department made up. It's something that school districts across the country have practiced for a number of years, and indeed RPS had a school health advisory board for a number of years in the early 2000s, and it just went dormant. And so the context for us today in this room is that we do have, I think, a clear opportunity to remount the effort and put it in a more present tense context. But generally speaking, the issues that a school health advisory board is focused on sort of run the gamut of a broader definition of wellness than just are the kids coughing and are they eating well, right? So we sort of care about everything from discrete illness to building a sort of foundation for lifelong wellness. So that includes social and emotional health, school nutrition, physical activity, student safety and violence prevention. There's a pretty broad sort of gamut here of issues that SHABs across the country can work on, and indeed some of the issues that we would like to work on with you all. So the role of the SHAB is sort of multifaceted. So bringing in sort of experts from a number of different disciplines, from the medical community, from our human services partners and providers, having parents and indeed high school students involved in the SHAB would allow the body to play a couple of different roles. So one is to sort of be a sounding board, that when there are issues or questions that come up related to wellness within the schools, the SHAB can be a place that the board and indeed the administration sort of sends interested or concerned, whether it's parents or neighbors, whoever it might be, teachers, educators as well. So we can sort of be a place, the SHAB can be a place where those discussions sort of happen at a preliminary level and can be explored and vetted as a sort of first step. And then in addition, as issues are raised and identified and prioritized, the options for action would be explored. So the purpose here is that the SHAB would sort of function very much as an advisory body to you all as the school board. So we would look at different options and present them to you all with sort of the plus minus, right? In terms of if the issue is, let's say, increasing the amount of physical activity that a certain age group is getting in RPS, we wouldn't come and say, do X, Y, Z. We would come and say, the option one, XYZ, has these advantages, these potential downsides, and option two, ABC, has these other advantages, these other downsides, right? So we would sort of be that front line of doing some homework, doing some legwork, right, to bring that to you all, and then indeed to answer questions about those options or other options that you all may want us to explore, want the SHAB to explore. And then indeed we'll also go, that next step is a role of promoting action, so involving parents, educators, and stakeholders in championing a course of action as you all have defined it. So those are sort of three elements of the role of the body. As I mentioned, this is sort of a national practice. The whole child, whole community, whole school sort of model is part of what animates a SHAB to exist for a body such as the Richmond School Board. So this is basically the construct that says, you know, children do not set a foundation for wellness through a single dimension. There are many, many variables and factors that set a child up for health this year as well as for their lifetime. And so it takes a sort of an integrative approach to how we are setting our kids up for wellness. So it's responding to a call for greater alignment and integration and collaboration between health and education to improve kids' abilities. So that includes in the discrete how they're performing in the classroom, so sort of cognitive and learning ability, physical, social, and indeed emotional development. All of those lenses sort of come into this whole child, community, and whole school model. I should say that, given that emphasis around alignment, that is indeed between health and education why we're here at the health department. I mentioned some of the examples of how we collaborate with RPS sort of on individual programmatic levels, but the health department definitely wants to figure out how we can bring more of our resources to bear. And some of those resources may indeed be community contracts and networks, and some of them may just be bringing more staff. And we have a lot of staff at the health department that don't explicitly work with RPS, but that have expertise and that have data analysis skills that can be used through this body. So I think this is sort of an extension of that to support the discrete health of our kids as well as setting up that lifelong foundation. So just some local examples. I mentioned that Richmond formerly had a SHAB, and after it went dormant, some of our sort of peer localities here in Virginia have certainly continued the work. So in Chesterfield, a few examples are listed there of things that their SHAB has done in the past few years, including developing a social and emotional learning sort of curriculum and standards, and indeed advocating for hiring a social emotional learning specialist position. They advised their school board in Chesterfield around their strategic plan to include a lens of wellness, and did a lot of the legwork for their school board around that. And also worked on changing school start times as a means to improve academic achievement as well as student health. In Charlottesville, a little bit to our west, they're providing support and research to their school board. They informed a wellness policy, language, and priorities for Charlottesville. And this is actually a group that developed the wellness policy as part of a collective effort. So they sort of ran the community engagement for the school board in Charlottesville to develop wellness policy. And they were sort of in charge of hosting the meetings, facilitating the meetings, advocating for folks to attend the meetings, and then reporting back to the school board on their findings. So those are some local examples. Next slide. But indeed, as I mentioned, it's a national best practice. You can see some of the places that have adopted SHABs in sort of peer cities. These are cities sort of similar to ours. They're not just the LAs, the New Yorks, and the Chicagos. It's Shelby County, Tennessee. It's Seattle. It's Fort Worth, Texas. So there's a lot of communities not so different from ours that are utilizing a body like a school health advisory board. So next, I just want to talk about sort of our next steps and let you guys know what we'd like to do next. So the intention is for the SHAB to exist as it did before it was dormant as a standing committee of the school board. So the SHAB would meet regularly with Dr. Sapini as the initial chair, and our health district staff would sort of provide support on an administrative level in terms of taking notes and minutes and sending out information for public meeting, public record purposes, right? As well as bringing some of that expertise to bear from a data analysis and best practice perspective. Public notice of SHAB sort of membership would be open and available to all in the community to express interest and to apply. All members of the school board, we would welcome to sort of send folks that way. So if there's indeed parents or educators that you think would be great on the SHAB, or medical professionals, whatever it might be, to please get them involved and encourage them to apply. Because this body has not been active in a number of years, I think would benefit from you all letting folks know, which is part of the purpose of my presentation tonight, so that you guys have some advance notice that this is something we're hoping to get going soon. And then Dr. Sapini and our staff would, after those applications are in, would sort of approve final composition based off of creating a mix of factors: discipline, geographic representation, professional expertise, those types of things. And then just very tangibly on a timeline level, here we are on October the 1st. So this month, what we'd like to do is working with the school board's attorney, Dr. Zaffini and Liz, who have expressed interest in the body already, as well as the administration, draft and finalize some bylaws, which would be the actual process by which the SHAB would play those roles I outlined previously, and what their sort of standard operating would be as a standing committee of your board. And so by the end of this month, our goal would be to make an application live for the SHAB, so that it would be available to all to apply. And then by mid-November, we would close applications and begin reviewing them, so that by the end of November, we could make some selections and some recommendations. So that would put us out to sort of early 2019 after the holiday break to actually get everything going. I know you guys in education are familiar with it. Seems like sometimes the first bell rings, and before you know it, there's the last bell, the day's over, and I think that's true certainly on a seasonal basis as well. So that is, I think, part of our desire coming here tonight, right at the beginning of this timeline, is to make sure you all are briefed about what this initiative can and hopefully will do for you all, and to make sure that if there are comments or questions, we're hearing them now before we get down the road. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, thank you for this presentation. Really appreciate this. So the board has to, have a discussion and to determine whether or not this is whether the board to move forward, and also discussing the guidelines and parameters of the committee. Because as a standing committee, the committee has to bring recommendations to the board. So there are a lot of things that the board, as a board, we need to discuss.
Absolutely.
But again, we appreciate you taking time and to gather this information for this presentation.
If there are questions, we'll be available at the department to answer them.
Dr. Sabine?
Just want to definitely thank you, Ruthie, and also Daniel Hula, who's the head of the health department, just for willing to partner with us. This is definitely something that's pretty much needed, but just their willingness to start the conversation so we can see what we can do in the long run. Thank you.
Ms. Dorr?
So in regards to process, you mentioned the board has to discuss, so what makes sense in terms of, or is this the timeline that Ruthie presented, is that the timeline that we're operating off of, or do we need to have a motion to approve it tonight, or?
It's the will of the board. It's the will of the board whether or not you want to reinstate the health advisory committee and, what are the guidelines and parameters of committee. Mr. Young?
Gladly defer to my two colleagues who have invested a lot of time in it, but by around this table, I've been advocating for standing committees for a while, so I'm really pleased that this conversation this evening, particularly because it's such an important topic. So I will gladly defer to one of my colleagues if you prefer to motion that this evening, but I'm prepared to do it absent that deference.
I move that we reinstate the SHAB.
Second.
It's been moved by Dr. Sapini and seconded by Ms. Dorr to reinstate the health advisory committee. Any discussion?
I just want to say that I am excited to have the support of the larger health community, as we certainly have a number of challenges facing us to address, and that additional support will certainly be helpful. One thing I did want to note, though, as we consider this, is it would be very important from my perspective that the School Health Advisory Board focus on the health and wellness priorities that we have already articulated in the strategic plan, and to not pursue additional new ones. Part of the purpose of a strategic plan is to make some choices, and we made those choices. And three areas that are very clearly articulated are ensuring nursing services in every one of our schools, improving the both satisfaction and nutritional value of our meals for our students, and increasing the mental health support services that we have in our schools. So those three are articulated in the strategic plan, and I would put forth that those should be the three key priority areas if the SHAB were to be reenacted. Obviously, we make our way through those. There could be other items to address, but I want to make sure that we actually use the strategic plan. We spent several months and nearly 200 meetings and countless community individuals guiding us along the way. Thank you.
And also to add, I do see overlaps in the presentation as it relates to the strategic plan. So that's something we have to be aware of. And also guidelines, reporting guidelines, the frequency, reporting out to the board and bringing forward recommendations for board's approval and parameters. Because like I said, it's been mentioned here tonight, there are some overlaps within our strategic plan, and so the scope of the committee needs to be clearly defined and articulated. If this is the will of the board to move forward, and also the application process, how are we communicating that selection process, how are we communicating that with the public? So there appears to be a lot of questions that need to be worked out to get feedback, bring feedback to the board. Ms. Gibson?
Yes, I'm supportive of moving forward with SHAB, and I think that Mr. Cameron brings up an important point in terms of aligning with the strategic plan. I'm wondering if we should amend the motion on the table to note specifically that, that we would align that with the strategic plan as it pertains to the question about operations, which I share your sentiment there. I wonder if we might consider scheduling or adding an agenda item in a future meeting, talking kind of broadly about best practices that we'd like to follow for standing meetings, not not specific to this one, but in general that would include the timing for reporting. At our last meeting for the finance committee, there was some discussion about documents, and we made all those. So I think that those are some general questions that might be worth considering on a broad level. There might be others that come up that all fall into the same.
Ms. Dorr?
I would agree with Ms. Gibson, especially as it really, having a meeting about meetings seems silly, but I do think it's worthwhile for us to make sure that we have norms and protocols for our standing committee meetings. And I was going to echo what Mr. Cameron said about aligning with the strategic plan, and I would be in support of amending the motion. Thank you. I had 5.6, which was nutrition, 3.3, which was nurses, and I don't know the exact one for mental health, because I actually didn't catch that one, but you know it off the top of your head.
I don't have it memorized.
I can look it up. But same one? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Nurses. Okay, so yeah, 5.6 and 3.3. And then I would add, I think those should definitely be the two priorities as it relates to the SHAB. I think Dr. Spini and I talked about the fact that this will be hopefully a body of professionals that have great ideas for how to create a healthy environment for our students, and to the extent there is something that is a quick win or that is related to the strategic plan, but worth maybe not exactly very prescriptively within those items, I do think it would be valuable to at least hear and consider those things, if it obviously weighing the fact that we do have a lot of work to do, etc.
Also, I would like to add to your point, Ms. Dorn. So you mentioned health professionals. Also, taking into consideration a much broader perspective and bringing in community, the parent community. Yes, health professionals, all the experts, but parents, from all across the district, I think would add value to the committee as well. Dr. Sapini?
Well, absolutely, and we also looked into having two students involved as well. Do the same process as two students being representatives from the board. So yes, I agree. We should have more of these health professionals.
So it's a motion to amend. So, and do we have an agreement to the amendment, to the motion?
So I motion to amend the motion to include the SHAB as an initial focus on section 5.6 and section 3.3 within the strategic plan, but also understands its role in providing recommendations broadly about improving the health of our students.
We need a second.
I second that.
So it's been a motion to amend the first motion to
Let the record reflect we've been drawn on Mrs. Burke.
So the amended motion, motion made by Ms. Dorr and seconded by Ms. Gibson. A motion to amend. The initial focus will be on section 5.6 and 3.3 in the strategic plan with room to focus on broad goal of making RPS a healthy environment for all students.
So what you're voting on now is the amendment to the motion, whether to amend Dr. Sapini's motion. Ms. Dorr?
Yes.
Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Ms. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Ms. Cosby? Yes. Mrs. Burke?
Yes.
Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Dr. Sapini?
Yes.
Mrs. Page?
Yes.
So the amended motion passes 9-0. The motion that you're now voting on is the motion made by Dr. Sapini, seconded by Ms. Dorr, and amended to reinstate the Health Advisory Committee with the initial focus would be on section 5.6 and 3.3 in the strategic plan with room to focus on the broad goal of making RPS a healthy environment for all students.
Any discussion? Call the question.
Ms. Dorr?
Yes.
Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Ms. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Ms. Cosby? Yes. Mrs. Burke?
Yes.
Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Dr. Sapini?
Yes.
And Mrs. Page?
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0. The next item on the agenda is 3.02, receive an update from the Richmond Public Schools Education Foundation.
Good evening, how are you all?
Welcome.
I think the last time I was in front of you, I had really wanted to travel for about 3 weeks, so thank you for having me back. It's been a year, still here, and looking forward to moving forward. I wanted to spend just a few minutes right at the beginning. I know there are different levels of knowledge and awareness of what the foundation's doing, so I wanted to give you guys just some fast facts of kind of where we are right now and what we're doing right now, and give you a perspective on kind of size-wise how that looks. The foundation's role is twofold. One is to increase private philanthropy coming into the school system, and that includes corporations and individuals and foundations here in the Richmond area and outside the Richmond area. And then also to be a liaison with those same parties to make sure that the things that they want to fund and are interested in participating in are aligned with what the school system is doing. So we serve a little bit as kind of an external relationship manager, partnering with some of the internal relationship managers that are there as well. We have 8 full-time staff now. Only 2 of those staff are not related to the program, so myself, and then we have a grant-funded operations manager who does a lot of day-to-day office work. And then we have all the other full-time staff are with the teacher program. So program manager who oversees the program, and then 5 full-time staff out at the high schools. So they are there, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute, but they're there to supplement the work that the counseling staff are doing in terms of college career. And they are at 5 comprehensive high schools. So far, we have not been able to generate funding at the specialty schools. But we do spend a lot of time trying to partner out with the specialty schools. We also have 6 part-time staff. They are part of the Tech Connect program. They teach tech literacy to middle schoolers. And last year, we raised just under $1 million. Our largest funders included the city, the Robbins Foundation, Altria, and Capital One. So I talked briefly about Tech Connect. We are a program provider for those of you familiar with Next Up. We are a program provider through the Next Up network. It actually started a long time ago with an initiative from, I think, a council member who wanted to give laptops to every RPS school member, and that translated into this program where instead of doing every child, we actually provide all these the children participating Next Up with basic tech literacy and awareness, basic Microsoft Office, kind of intro to tech kind of stuff. And then as an independent incentive, if they make it to Tech Connect, the minimum number of times in a session, they actually receive a laptop at the end of the session. We go out and buy a laptop for them. Last year, 89 students received laptops through that program and open homes. So that's less than the number of students participated in the program, but that's the number who participated enough to actually justify a new piece of technology. The other program we have is RPA Future. We are, as I said, in the 5 comprehensive high schools. RPA Future is a program, and it's also a physical space, the Future Center. In most of the buildings, the Future Center is attached to the in-office and counseling spaces. But it exists and serves as a central space for students and staff and parents to come to for college and career conversations. So our staff operate out of there, and then in addition to that, groups like RASP and Virginia College Advising Corps and any college recruiter are all coming in through the Future Center as a central hub, so that there aren't all these disparate inbound requests coming into the principal or the counseling staff. And one of the other benefits of that for us is that with a college recruiter, for example, when one of them calls any one of the schools, we immediately, one of our standard questions to them is, are you going to see the other schools? And if you're not, why not, and how can we help you do that? So we're trying to make the most of their time and their visits to Richmond and to RPS to make sure that they are seeing all of them. That's one of the ways that even though we're not seeing the specialty schools, we're trying to boost the college access that's happening in specialty schools. For the future, one of the big things for us right now is career side of things. Only 36% of RPS seniors went to a four-year school in the 16-17 year. That's a lot of other students going to other channels. So that's 2-year, that's military, that's apprenticeships, that's straight into the workforce, and then that's also they're not going anywhere. So we've been moving a lot of our attention into that space and trying to help find channels and find relationships. So one of the relationships we have now, ECU runs an education program where they will recruit RPS seniors, run them through a 13-week kind of boot camp style program, teach them about what ECU Health does and how to be an employee in that space, and then give them a job if they make it through that and make it through the interview process. So we actually have pipeline students do that. We had almost 1,700 students and parents make it through the future centers, and that's not including all of the classrooms. Right now, most of the staff are going out to the classrooms and actually going into classes and signing kids up for college visits, on-site and off-site, and also helping students sign up for financial aid completion. We're about actually today kick off the FAFSA season for fellow aid. So we're out in the classrooms working with the students. Last year we visited 10 different colleges with over more than 250 kids. We usually will charter a bus and then take the students kind of mostly within a day's drive of Richmond. So Tech, JMU, Washington Lee, OU, Hampton, Multi State, and kind of up and down those corridors. And then we also just raised money for special projects. So last year we raised $200,000 to support the 100 Days Plan and the strategic plan, which I think saw some of that discussion as it happened. And so we get those, sometimes we go out and actively do stuff for that. Other times it's kind of came down to us. So for the Obama Elementary name change, we had about $20,000 for us, and we're actually going to straight to RPS today to help offset some of the costs we did to school. Looking forward, we are very excited that the strategic planning process for RPS is done. We believe that part of our job is to align with that and find places inside the strategic plan that we can raise money and there are good opportunities to raise money. So I'm having a lot of conversations already with the superintendent and with the staff about where good line items are in the strategic plan. There's the stuff you others were just talking about with SHAB and the nurses in schools. Last week I was at a lunch where I started floating that idea out to the lunch program, just to kind of see how we're getting it. So in the coming weeks, we will be working at a more detailed level to figure out where the best funding opportunities are. We're actually going to go through our own mini strategic planning process to not so much develop a full-blown strategic plan, but figure out how we align with the existing strategic plan that RPS has done and leverage all the work that's already been done around that. Future centers will continue to expand on career services. We hope that that program will continue and continue to grow. And hopefully at some point we can figure out how to get it out into specialty schools. I know that there is interest and need in that. And we're also looking at other places where there could be really natural channels. So in a couple weeks we're going to be meeting with Jay Sargent to talk about, we're sending a lot of students there anyway. So how do we make that a more automatic thing? That if you do nothing else, you can still just go to at least go to Reynolds and continue your education. So that's some of the places we're looking at now. I wanted to read you a text that one of my staff got just kind of in closing. Because I think sometimes we forget, in the hustle of things, we forget kind of the impact that can be had and the reach that we can have and the long tail that is on that reach. So one of my staff received this text a couple weeks ago. It said, Mr. Brower, I didn't forget that your birthday passed and I just had so much on my plate, so happy belated birthday. I'm glad I've met you because I don't know where I would be if it wasn't for you. You have helped me get scholarships, a job, and go to school. I really appreciate your hard work, dedication, and for helping. Many birthday wishes to you. So that's a student who had been out of RPS for 2 years. But the reach and impact, Mr. Brower specifically in the Future Center and this work, is having that multiple impact. So when you get this come across your desk, it's nice to be able to show. Good questions?
Thank you. Ms. Owen?
I have a quick question. I'm very excited about this Tech Lit with Next Up. And this year, Next Up is moving into some middle schools they weren't in before. So you all will be also working with that.
Yes,
So,
we've already expanded into the 2 new schools.
okay. So here's hoping there'll be more.
We will pretty much reconfigure whatever schools they do.
More computers going home with students. Now, is that for the, they run the class for a period of time. How long a period of time is it?
So Next Up is structured in that they run 3 8 to 10 week sessions, depending on which
Right.
session it is. And so we run the class for each, like we'll run
Okay.
one technic per session. So for every
Okay.
school we're in, we run 3 sessions.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Great. And we'll be doing, in the next couple of weeks, we'll be reaching out to all of you to invite you to come visit us here at the Future Center and see some of that in action if you guys have a chance to do that. Thank you guys.
Thank you for this information. Next item.
The next item is 3.03, receive an update on the senior auditor position.
So Ms. Dorr?
Good afternoon, board, or evening, board members. If you recall, during our budget cycle last year, we approved the reinstatement of the school board auditor position. This is a position similar in a way to the city auditor position in that we reports directly to the school board. I think this is very apropos given our recent finance audit, that having some additional oversight and reinstating this position will be good for us from a governance perspective. The job description that you see before you is a slightly modified position from the prior auditor position. Edits included a couple of tweaks from our finance committee, which include just that they'll work with our finance committee to set their audit plan, but also bring it towards the board for approval. An edit to for the auditor to encourage transparency.
Ms. Dorr, can you speak closer to the mic because they can't hear you back?
Sorry.
Better? Ooh, much better. To catch everyone up to speed, we're hiring an auditor. We approved the funds last year as part of the budget cycle. It's apropos given our audits that we need some additional oversight, and this human, I'm confident, will be able to provide that. The job description that you see before you is the prior auditor job description that used to report to the board. And there were some tweaks from board members, including one from Ms. Gibson to encourage external facing communication and opportunity to put things, financial items online or in front of the public. The check register was a great first step, but my colleague made some good points about the fact that we can identify other opportunities for transparency. One from Mr. Young in regards to making sure that the auditor is not just a bookkeeper, but someone that really makes sure that we're understanding how our funds are spent and that they're tied to intended outcomes. And then some changes from Ms. Page and myself, just making sure that the auditor position is aligned to report to the board. And definitely love your feedback on either this job description and or just sort of the role of the auditor more broadly. And then also, so
tonight, ideally we'd approve this job description and then we have HR post the job and then bring 3 candidates for us to interview as a board. But if you have any feedback on that process, please let us know, or if you have any feedback on the job description, let us know as well.
Ms. Owen?
Just in the interest of transparency, so everybody understands, the auditor is the employee of the school board. I mean, we don't usually get into job descriptions for everybody that works for RPS. But this particular job is the person who will work for the board.
Yes, and I think Ms. Cosby a while ago brought up a good point that we should have a discussion in public session about exactly how this auditor will report to us and the norms and expectations that we'll set. So now is the time and space to have that discussion.
Can I ask one question? Does this role supervise the current auditor role?
Yes.
Ms. Cosby?
Thank you all so much for the work that you've done on this. And I do have one question. I don't know, for the line that was added, evaluates policies, programs, and systems to ensure they achieve intended results. Okay, a while back, we also discussed the auditor working both with the school board and administration to ensure that our policies are in fact being implemented. Because we've seen situations where that has not happened. So does that sentence cover that? Or do we have to perhaps, I mean, that's the will of the board, be a little bit more specific as well?
So, maybe Ms. Stewart, just went back and forth with, the language to make sure it did not limit us to, those responsibilities. Stewart?
Yeah, and that was an ad from Mr. Young, so I'll let him also comment on that. I think you bring up a good point, that I personally would love to see that additional oversight as it relates to our policies. I'm not sure that the skill set for this auditor as it relates to kind of financial oversight is the best role, but I'm certainly open to that. So either we should clarify and sort of make sure that we are looking for someone that both has financial oversight and maybe some policy or legal ability, or we look at putting that task under another human.
Okay, and the reason why I'm mentioning that under this position, when we, early on, when we looked at a report that came out of DC after there were some issues with the graduation rate. And so one of the recommendations in that report called for the auditor to look at implementation. So that was just an idea from that report. So.
Ms. Gibson?
I think that, it summarizes what we talked about quite a bit in the meeting. I wanted to know too that one of the things that we talked quite a bit as we were talking about this was the stark reality that this one person and the one person that we have is going to be, has a very large workload. And I think it was noted that, prior to the recession, that we had 4 auditors, and now we have 1. And so, I think that our board may, want to look at, maybe some type of meeting or something to talk to the person and to figure out how they help them prioritize what this person will honestly be able to do given the immensity of the task at hand, especially reviewing the audit findings.
Mr. Young?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate the team incorporating those recommendations that I submitted. And to Felicia's point, my concern since I first saw the job description was that when most persons who perhaps were a candidate for the position or considering being a candidate for the position would say, oh, this is an accounting job. And it is an accounting job, but I don't want to put words in my colleague's mouth, but to Felicia's point, it's more than that. At least that was my intent. It really is to address our systems approaches and our policies and procedures, et cetera. So I'm mindful that the language was incorporated, really grateful for that, and concur with the chair's point that we wouldn't want to limit, we would not want to include language with the kind of specificity that would limit other kinds of things, but on balance, I do agree with my colleague when she shared that. Just want to make sure that persons, when they're considering applying for this position, understand that, as Liz said so well earlier, this is not a bookkeeping job. This is an individual who is principally going to be responsible for, among other things, assessing the cost-benefit analysis, for determining those, helping to determine those KPIs, those kinds of things that were referenced in the Council of Great City Schools audit.
So to also to give you a historical perspective, in the past, those responsibilities only focused on auditing the student activity funds within the school division. And through the audit committee, recommendations came to the board that those persons would do more than just audit student activity funds. So we anticipate in the job description that this person and the other person we have in the department currently will develop an audit work plan for board approval, and so that they can audit the systems of RPS, but also creating their risk assessment, and based on the risk assessment, that's how we will prioritize the audit for the system. And this is the board's oversight. This is a separate body from the administration, but they also work in collaboration together, but it's the board's oversight. And so, in light of what has happened, I think this is a great effort moving forward to create the accountability and transparency, and for the board to maintain its oversight. Ms. Dorr?
I completely agree. To circle back to Ms. Cosby's initial question, it seems like the statement doesn't limit their ability to look at the policies. I do think, to Ms. Gibson's point, there might be a capacity issue, and I totally agree that I think we shouldn't forget about the point that you just made, and make sure that when we're working with this auditor, that is part of their priority, or that we find a way to make that a priority. So, anyways, just my 2 cents.
And just real briefly, some folks in the room will recall when we were considering the kind of person we would hire for a superintendent, and we got that one right and hired the right man. We had a conversation about how we were going to advertise that position, and perhaps for the persons that are going to take the lead on this, we can also perhaps be cognizant of the kinds of places that will advertise this particular position, and not limit it just to the places where somebody with, for example, just an accountant would look at.
So to go through the normal, HR process, notification or publication to avoid any type of interference, but go through the normal HR process. And also, I think it's important as we move forward with this, we have to think about recommendations from the audit the various audits that may, be completed and the board receive the findings. Because I remember in the past, the recommendations that came forward to the board, recommendations were not able to be implemented because funding was attached to those recommendations. So again, it always goes back to the bottom line, the dollar amount. So that's something we have to keep in the forefront as well. As we receive the recommendations from the various audit reports, if those recommendations cannot be implemented, then how do we, find the funding to support the recommendation? Mr. Young?
Yeah, just real briefly, I think it really is important to point out something that we all know, perhaps folks in the public may not know, and specifically that to Liz's point, it is apropos that we are having this conversation this evening and subsequent release of the audits, but that this was something that was initiated sometime prior to release of the audit, and really in tandem with what our superintendent acknowledged we needed and submitted in his 100-day plan, and that the recognition by this board that we need somebody to do precisely this regards dysfunction that preceded this superintendent and his staff. I just think that's important to point out.
Exactly, because this has been a discussion since this board sworn in 2017. It has been one of the many parts. So glad to see that it's finally come to fruition.
Can I ask just one procedural question? Once we post the position description, I want to make sure we're respectful of the board's process. So to whom should inquiries be directed? Is it to the members of the finance committee, or I just want to make sure that we appropriately follow up? To Ms. Wilson? Okay. Well,
Ms. Crosby?
Thank you. I thought we just said it didn't follow the normal HR procedure, so while in the HR vet the applications and then provide the top, as Ms. Dorr said, the top 3 will have you to the finance committee.
I was under the impression that since it's the board's hire, it would be inappropriate for the administration to be doing that vetting, and so that's why I wanted to clarify.
So we wanted to go through the normal HR process.
Got it. So, I'm sorry?
Ms. Owen?
Sorry. I think we would also, for clerk and assistant clerk, we would, those, even though they're board,
Understood.
we would still go through that.
Understood, thank you.
So Ms. Dorr?
Yeah, I think it's fine to go, as we talked about, go through the HR process and then have them bring 3 for us to interview. Similar to in the superintendent search, when we had we had a task for that committee to bring forward 3 candidates for us. We also, as a board, had the opportunity to review all of the resumes of people in case there was someone that we want to interview that maybe didn't make it past the screens. I think following that process might be helpful as well, just to give us the opportunity if we want to look at other resumes.
We're glad to make all resumes available.
So the question for the board, we have consensus to move forward to post the position, the senior auditor position.
One last inquiry. per the memorandum of understanding with the state, I do believe we need to get approval for any new such hires. I would defer to our board lawyer on that one, but I do want to make sure that we follow all the necessary procedures. Approval of the budget from the process or from the board? So, under our corrective action plan, via the MOU, new hires have to be vetted by the Office of School Improvement from the state, and so I just want to make sure that we are in compliance with that. And when it pertains to board hires, I'm just raising it as a question.
So we need to get clarity on that, Next item is because we have received reports from board members on starting committee board assignments and conferences attended. There were 2 or 3 posted to board by CSU and the I have an update and I will provide the written document following this meeting. So I visited Nashville, Tennessee last week, and this is the only part. And it's completely, there's an hour time difference. It didn't seem like a lot, but for some reason, I could not keep it straight in my head. But anyway, it was so much information, but it was good information. So the academies, the Nashville Academies for Next Generation Learning Path. So this conference was attended by various school boards across the country, locally, Chesterfield School Board, Chesterfield principals, City of Hampton Public Schools were in attendance. And so I had a chance to dialogue with them. I had a chance to dialogue with school board in Columbus, Ohio, just various school boards throughout the country. Some of the processes in place, some were exploring whether or not to go forward with the academies. Some in the process of pulling the trigger, the green light to move forward. But one thing I took away from the conference, and this came from Hampton Public School System. Start slow, narrow your focus, because this is a long-term commitment. And we have to be intentional with our planning. And when I say a long-term commitment, it's a long-term commitment for this board and the next board and the next board. A commitment from the administration, the city administration, city council, the business community, the workforce community, and community colleges. Because the focus is on every student. Every student graduating from high school, being college and career ready. Not either or, but being ready for college or being ready for a career. The opportunities, I feel was could be tremendous for our students. And one thing that really impressed me was the students in Nashville having the opportunity to job shadow with many of the business partners in Nashville, also the opportunity for internships. So that exposure
to our students, for our students that may not get that opportunity. But the opportunity to explore various careers, also obtaining certifications in various fields, and having the opportunity to say, I thought I liked this, but I think I want to try something else. But they had that opportunity. And also that opportunity, if college wasn't for them, they had an opportunity when they graduated from high school to be able to move into a career with a certification. So again, it created that equity across the district, regardless where you were located, regardless of your zip code. Every child in high school had that opportunity to be college and career ready. So again, and I noticed in Hampton, they have seen improvement in their attendance and their graduation rate. And so they have not been in the process as long as Nashville, but they are starting to see improvement. But that was one thing took away from them, from Hampton City Public Schools, to start slow and narrow your focus. And I want to thank the board for the opportunity to represent Richmond Public Schools and our superintendent and Dr. L. So I'm looking forward to possibly doing a one-day trip, going down to Hampton to see, to visit and see their academies there. Thank you. Mr. Baldwin and Mr. Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regard to specialty programs, I thought I'd take this time to give a brief update about Code RBA. Very excited about seeing the growth that we've seen there. In particular, it was very important to the success of this school, continued success of this school, to have a student body that is continuing to keep up with prior year's numbers. So I want to thank the board here for increasing the RPS enrollment at Code RBA by 5 students. That was an important step for the school. With that in mind, the staff has now grown to 21. The facility is expanding to add additional classroom space. There's an additional space towards the back of the building for the older students. They also have a space where they can work on some of the internships that they are taking part in remotely. As you may be aware, Code RBA does provide internship opportunities for students through Mass Potential in particular. Last year, for those of you who weren't aware, Code RBA was granted a Magnet School Assistance Program grant for $6 million over 4 years, which has also been instrumental in the growth and success of the school. And I also want to, I think it's very important to note the efforts that they've taken to ensure that there's a diverse student body. So the school, the incoming class is virtually 50-50 male to female. I think there was maybe one more male student than female students. So it's great to see that so many students of both young men and women are interested in school. And then, of course, there is a very unique lottery system, which I know that we talked about before, that helps to ensure that the student population, from taking into account other diversity metrics, is reflective of the community. And I think it's been very successful, and I'm happy to provide more details about how that works. I sent an email earlier with regard to the governor's school, asking for another school board member to attend a luncheon on November 2nd. Jonathan was the first one to sign up for free lunch, so thank you for free stuff. Yeah. I stated free lunch. I think it's maybe we'll have to bag around. I'll let you know. Dr. Lowry is entering his first year at the school. I think he's a perfect fit for it. He's very gregarious. He connects well with students. And I think that they're off to a great start to the year, and I hope to find out more at the Fall Festival event that they have this Friday. So that's what we're at right now.
Thank you. Mr. Young.
Appomattox Regional Governor School, you all know that Dr. James Victor retired for a second time, and we're in the process of identifying a new executive director. We have a search team in place. Yours truly is on that search team. We've identified October the 15th as a tentative date to initiate interviewing. We have a very ambitious, even stretch goal objective relative to the new executive director or the equivalent of principal starting in time for the new semester or the spring semester. 227 persons responded to an anonymous online survey, which I thought was terrific. A lot of outstanding data. If anybody's interested in reviewing that data, just let me know. But the big takeaway was that one, the families, the students, the stakeholders want somebody who's invested in the arts, somebody who has a track record or history of involvement, engagement in the arts, and two, somebody that is very supportive of and has a history of supporting integrated learning, cross-pollination pertinent to different disciplines. So I'll have a lot more to share about that in the next couple of weeks, but I would invite my colleagues to not wait for that, but particularly if you have an interest. All of us, we have almost 100 students, students, residents of the city of Richmond attending the school, so we all have constituents that are attending the school, so please weigh in and let me know your thoughts before we get started.
And also I forgot to add, Hampton Public Schools, they started with the freshman academies. Thank you. Next item.
The next item is item 4, your administration's business, 4.01, receive an update on transportation.
Good evening, Madam Chair Page, Vice Chair Dr. King, Superintendent Cameron, members of the board, office leadership. My name is Damon Richardson, the Director of Systems and Process Improvement. And with me this evening is the Director of Transportation, Floyd Miles. On behalf of the Chief Operating Officer, we'd like to provide a slightly overview update on transportation for Richmond School. On any given school day, RPS and its contractors transports 21,967 students on 369 bus routes throughout the city of Richmond. These 369 bus routes are duplicated in the morning and AM run and in the afternoon and the PM run, for a total of 730 trips. As the table shows, RPS operates on a 3-tiered system in which these routes are distributed across this particular system. So we have the staffing and buses to accommodate the transportation for the school system across these particular routes. As you can see from the layout here, from the table, that we're kind of operating sort of at a disadvantage in terms of our routing inefficiency. On the front end, which is the high school routes, and on the latter part of the system routes, which is on the elementary side, we're kind of heavily loaded. And so we do have some inefficiencies that are impacting our student arrival times in the school. So it brings us to our next slide here. For this particular slide, you can kind of see the impact of, or you can kind of fully appreciate of how the inefficiencies in our busing tier kind of impacts the levels of the schools and the operation of the school. So this primarily represents the latter end of the bus route tier, which is the elementary school. This is where we have most of the impact in terms of having double runs or triple runs. And what I mean by double run, if you look at the regular run, it's pretty much your first run out to the school. To the student's home or to the school. And then any additional runs after that initial run is where a bus operator is going back to pick up students to the same school. And this may happen again twice or 3 times. So it depends on the level of staffing that we have available for those particular routes. And again, on the elementary tier, which is the last tier, and the high school tier, those routes are kind of heavily impacted. And at the elementary level, if you kind of look at the numbers here, they account for 51% of the total runs through the school. And so this inefficiency is kind of impacting how we operate.
Ms. Cosby?
That I'm understanding the regular runs and double runs. So overall, I have five, it would be now five buses that are going out.
Regular buses of 5.
5 regular buses that are going out. Then 4 of the 5 double back again. And then for green, I have 6 regular buses that are going out. All 6 of those go back again.
And then another one, 2 more than that.
So with at our elementary school level then, well, let's just take green for example. Okay, no, that's not the one I asked. So have we picked up our students earlier, knowing that we're going to have to do the double and triple run?
What happens is we want to improve this, when we have to double the triple back, and what happens is we bring them in a little earlier, then those buses go back and we have to get them back in time before bail time. Now, things can happen that you have to break down or something that will affect the whole process of it.
So, I mean, one way you kind of think about, going back to the first line, you think about the tiering system, how it's set on the front and the back end. And one of them is obviously to improve that, is to adjust the schedule of the schools to make it more easy to distribute, or to add additional bus operators to the additional plan. The student bus ride time. District-wide, on average, a student is on a bus to school or from school about 21 minutes, based on the optimized routes from our routing system. Now, this information or these flight times actually represents the bus route times, not the actual time that the students are on the bus. Because we don't have any tracking technologies, scanning codes, kids coming off and on the bus. So it's not real time, it's based on the routes in the system. Elementary line times are about 4 minutes shorter at 17 minutes overall compared to the district. When you think about the number of elementary schools that we have, it means a lot more students are closer to the schools than have shorter routes. And so it's sort of the opposite for the high schools and the middle schools. So within 3 minutes over the time. We have fewer middle and high schools, and therefore more students have longer routes to those schools.
Ms. Owen?
Okay. So, this list of students from Broad Rock to Westover are the only schools that have double and triple runs. Is that correct? Well, I noticed that all 5 of the schools in my district are in that very short list. And I certainly see that they are all on the south side.
Yes.
Every single one of the schools that is getting a double run, and the only one that's getting a triple run, are on the south side. And I just have to tell you, that does not make me a smiling, happy person. And so I would just invite you to consider whether there's any kind of equity that we might consider about spreading that out a little bit on the north side. Thank you.
Ms. Gibson?
I want to express that this person on the north side cares just as much about that as, I mean, I share your sentiment, Zoe, and you know, I think that transportation, and there's nothing glamorous about school buses, I know, but it is of critical importance that we start at square one. We're able to get our kids to school, And, you know, I mean, I just think of myself as a parent waiting at a bus stop, seeing that the bus was too full, and wondering if there's going to be another one that swings back by. It just, you know, we need to do better. I would be, you know, I would implore that we look at how we spread the wealth. I would like to see a map of, particularly with the hubs, and this is something that I had requested before. You know, we had a parent today that talked about the length of time, and I just think I'm a visual person, and I think it would be also very helpful for parents as we have our, you know, transportation system online. If you're looking to try to understand what's the most convenient way to do it, that having a map would be very helpful. But also for us, as we're looking to ensure that there is equity throughout the district, seeing something visual like that would be very helpful. So yes, and I think what I would also like to do is just quantify, you know, how much money do we need to really be able to do this right? And I recognize we may not be able to do it now, but I think it's really important to have that number because, you know, attendance is more important with our new, every time, you know, the ESSA rules. So I think as we're looking at the state and trying to get money, because I don't believe the state provides any funding for transportation. So, you know, this to me is just of critical importance.
One of the things I want to bring to your attention, one of the reasons why you have so much on the south side, because the growth of the city is really on the south side. The Hispanic population, which is green, it has tripled. I've been here going on my 5th year, and it has grown so quickly that it's hard for us to even get our hands around it. So it's not that we would deliberately want to do it. I would like to have every bus but one bus trip to pick up each student. One thing we also do, we tell the parents, and we also meet with the principal at those schools and say, you have A run, B run, and C run. So that's how the parents know which one to come to. So we try to make it some kind of convenience to make it so they're all not there. Because if I have all the students go there at the same time, I might overload the bus right then. So the goal is to work with those principals, and we go out and we send our supervisors at the stops to be with those buses to try to get them on the right buses. And in the evening, the principal holds back A, B, and C so we can put them on the bus. So we're not trying to just rush them on there, so the parents won't know what's going on. And it causes them to be getting home much later than what they were normally.
Dr. Sapina, Ms. Dorr, Ms. Cosby, Mr. Young.
Couple of questions, just maybe buses. How many buses do we have?
234.
How many drivers do we have?
Yeah. So it's not only that sheet. That issue right there. Right there. That is right there. We budgeted 126, we have 114 fields, and we have 12 positions open right now, 25 sub-positions. So it's a total of 37 positions still. Yeah.
So, does that mean we have 120 buses that stay unused?
That's enough to use. They're older buses. They're much older buses. So we don't, right, they're more than a substitute. We have to have a certain percentage of substitute with the bus break down. Plus, every 45 days, we have to take the bus out of service and do an inspection.
I'll just note that, excuse me, the bus age information is also included in the presentation. So as it articulates, a significant portion, 43% of our bus fleet is 14 years or older, and industry standards recommend replacement after 13 years. So there's no shortage of challenges as it pertains to our bus system. And to Ms. Gibson's point, part of the process of pricing out the strategic plan is addressing this very issue. This is an item which we have called out in the strategic plan, not just for the current system, but as we've discussed, there are significant equity issues here. Our policies as they pertain to which kids get transportation for specialty schools and versus open enrollment and so on and so forth need to be addressed as well. So there's a significant cost here that we are trying to wrap our hands around in time for the budget season coming up this winter.
So, this question for the board. You want Mr. Miles and Mr. Richardson to complete the presentation and then we continue with our questions? Because I know this is a hot topic, high priority for us.
So I think we covered a good portion, the meat of the presentation, in terms of what our current needs are. And really, we have to here just to kind of give you a feel for what our needs are, and then have a follow-up presentation with more data with respect to cost to close the gap.
I think it's also worth just noting on the pay front that as a result of the board's action in our budget for this year, we are able to now pay a competitive rate with surrounding school systems. That being said, we are all competing with national trucking chains, which pay significantly more, and they offer benefits. And so I think that is something that we need to look at as we think about potential solutions, because ultimately, this is I think that Mr. Miles, correct me if I'm wrong, but the biggest lever here is getting more drivers. Addressing the age of the fleet is, I would say, second, but first and foremost, it's getting more drivers on a consistent basis, and that would enable us to eliminate the double runs, the triple runs, to provide a higher level of customer service, and certainly if we were to provide transportation for all open enrollment, and if we were to rethink the hub system, we would likely need even more drivers. Is that accurate? Yes.
Ms. Dorr? Ms. Dorr, Ms. Owen, Ms. Cosby? Dorr, Owen, and Cosby.
Yeah, I mean, my point or question, or I don't know what it is, but I just think we need to, certainly there's a funding component to this, but to me, it seems like with 37 open driver positions and pay parity with the counties, that this is also a, how do we create a competitive job challenge? And so I just think when we get the larger presentation, the cost budget impact is really important, but I think we also need to, similar to the nurse problem, it's not just about getting more money, it's about rethinking what this position is. I have felt for a long time like we treat certain employees like they're part of the RPS family, but not all employees like they're part of the RPS family, and our bus drivers should be part of the RPS family. There should be opportunities for upward mobility. We should offer professional development for them. I mean, this is utopian vision, but certainly I want us to rethink what is a bus driver, because working part-time with no benefits for 14 hours, $14 an hour just doesn't make any sense in today's economy when we have low unemployment, et cetera. So I talked about this last year, but I just want us to be creative about how we think about the bus driver position. Is there an opportunity to consolidate that job with a cafeteria worker and make it a holistic worker or a janitor or something that provides them a full-time job with benefits that makes it competitive in today's environment and gives them an opportunity to move up and do something.
Ms. Owen?
Okay, I just want to share with you all some you may not be aware of, and that is when you go back up here to the vendors. I'm very surprised to see that you say that elementary routes are 8. I know that First Student also transports Head Start, so I don't know if they're included in that or not. But I'm on the Head Start Policy Council, and I will tell you, and you know this too because we had an issue, one way in a First Student seat, one way, $64. Round trip, $128. So when we talk about trying to come up with solutions and economies, that's a big one right there. My daughter says, Uber can do it for less. I said, I'm sure Uber doesn't have the liability insurance and all that, but $128 round trip per student per day. All my Head Start kids.
Ms. Cosby?
There's one slide that we didn't get to, if you don't mind. It's the bus tracking and communication.
GPS. Our GPS system is a tracking system that we put on about 4 years ago to help find out where buses were. It also helps us let us know what's not going to start in the morning. It tells us the bus is not going to start because the battery's weak or something's going on. If the bus is getting ready to run hard, it's a message to us saying that the bus is in trouble. If it gets in an accident, it's a message saying that it was involved in an accident. It also tells us if the driver went to the stop or not. We use that all the time when the parents call and say that the bus is down. We'll pull it up real quick and see that does the driver have to activate his door every time he goes to the stop. Is the child there or not? He's supposed to open the door and close it. That activates and sends a signal that it's actually working. It tells us the speed of the bus. It tells us everything we need to know about the bus. Parent called me and I'm at my desk. I'll bring it up and I can tell them where the bus is. The bus is right around the corner. You should be there within a minute. You should see it. In fact, it's usually there. It's always coming. The other systems we have is it's called the arrival board at the schools. We wish all the schools would use it. It's a board that tells them what time the buses are there. If they're there, say for instance, they're in school. The principal usually has someone in their office to go up and put it up on the system, and they can tell them all their buses are there. Then they won't have to pick up the phone and call us or get on the radio and call us. It tells them in the morning. It also tells them in the evening. And that's an administrative thing we put in that came with the GPS system. They allow our principals to know when their buses will be there. The other thing is the My Stop. That's something we added towards the end of last year. We added My Stop. The parents can use their app on the phone and say how many minutes it's going to be before the bus is at the stop. So if I'm at work and I'm the parent and I want to my child bus back, I can look and see what time it's going to get there.
And it works not just for pickup, but for drop off.
It works for morning and evening.
Because
Yes, both.
there are a lot of times if there has been, let's say, there's an accident or there's a delay in the parents.
We'll get a call on that.
Yeah, okay. And what I wanted to say for my colleagues, not just in terms of, and I'm glad Mr. Miles did mention it, with the equity piece in terms of the double and triple bus stops, it really goes back to, even as we're having these conversations about transportation, we must have conversations about rezoning. And I don't think it can be said enough, because just to say, hey, I want more buses over on the south side as opposed to the north side, is not addressing the issue as to why we have double and triple stops. It's really because, as Mr. Miles said, we have such tremendous growth and we are topsy-turvy. We're topsy-turvy. And we have, and as you know, in terms of, the attendance and overcrowding in schools in your district and over on the south side. So we have to, I think we would do ourselves an injustice and our students an injustice if we just focus on transportation and don't have a conversation about rezoning as well, because that impacts transportation.
Mr. Young, Ms. Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm really encouraged by this conversation. And candidly, I think this conversation is long overdue. I really like Liz's recommendations. I think it's something that we should explore. I like what Linda said, what Felicia just commented on. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest things for me pertinent to transportation regards field trips. And it drives me crazy that so few of our students have an opportunity to traverse significant distances for the purpose of a field trip because we just don't have the fleet to accommodate it. So I'm going to, at the risk of making your ears bleed, I'm going to renew my pitch that we consider scaling up our collaboration with GRTC for the purpose of high school students, because candidly, they've got the capacity and they have the will. And I think it's an opportunity for us to be creative thinkers and for us to address a lot of the problems. So that's my pitch. But then I had two questions. And the first question regarded something that we all kind of intuitively know, but I don't think we've conversed about. And specifically, you referenced almost when you commenced your remarks, you spoke to start times, school start times. And I'm very curious if we have done, in purposes of conversation for offline, but if we've done any analysis as it relates to what school start times would need to look like to address the problem that we are deliberating on today. So that's my first question. It's kind of rhetorical right now, maybe. And then my second question regards the revenue that we're anticipating because of all these scofflaws and people out there not stopping. Really, I should use stronger terms for folks that do this, but people that aren't stopping at the when a bus puts on their signals, and I don't think, Madam Chair, we have, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we've had a conversation yet about how we're going to appropriate or allocate those monies, or have we? In other words, what fund will be the recipient of those dollars?
For the first one that you was talking about, we will probably, when we do the proposal for the hub stops, we will bring a recommendation at that time of what times would work for us.
And so that would just be clear, so you're going to incorporate school start times in that?
Well, let me jump in here. I think there's a short-term solution and a long-term solution. I think to Ms. Cosby's point, the long-term solution really gets into rezoning and the future, where our schools are and how big they are and all that sort of thing. I think there's a short-term solution that I would like to put in front of you for next year, which would be to try to reduce inequity, reduce times, and increase general satisfaction on the part of students and families. We're not going to be able to, as we have discussed, figure out the rezoning process in the next couple of months when we're going to start budget conversations. So that's why we're going to have to face this. I also think, as this board is well aware, changing the start times of school is a very complicated issue, and we are not going to have the capacity to, I believe, have that conversation with the depth that it would need in time for budget season as well. So I think, again, what is the short-term solution, what's the long-term? I think, as you have said, and as Ms. Dorr said and others, I think we have to approach the role of the bus operator more creatively to tackle this issue, because we're never going to be able to compete, or certainly not anytime soon, in terms of the pay that an Amazon truck driver is paying right now. And so we want to kind of look at what can we do now to improve the experience for our kids. And then I think there's a longer term question after we look at rezoning and everything else. On the cameras, it's my understanding that that money goes to pay off first.
Correct.
The cost of the cameras and I believe bus payments. Is that accurate?
No, it was just the cost of the
cameras. And then the funds accrue to RPS.
What is that? What's that number? What was the capital cost for us? Do we have that? I know it's not fair to ask that question, folks, off the top of my head. I'm just curious I don't know what that cost was, the capital cost of this cameras.
We didn't pay anything for it. The tickets pay for it.
Well, there's no, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's no initial outlay. There's clearly a cost, and the funds from the tickets are paying off that cost.
Yeah.
Mr. Miles, do you have that number? If not,
I don't have that number tonight.
So we can bring that information back. So move on to Ms. Gibson and Dr. Sakini.
I wanted to thank Ms. Cosby for bringing up rezoning. I think that's important for us to keep that aligned with this conversation because the two are so tied. And also piggybacking on what Ms. Dorr said about looking at, how we can make this position, you know, more complete and attractive. One of the questions I had was, how many hours on average do our bus drivers work?
We have 8-hour contracts, 7-hour contracts, and 6 hours. Majority, 70 to 80% is 6 hours.
Right. So, and is that, I mean, I think that, so having someone, so even if you work 8 hours, you still don't have benefits?
Yes. Our drivers, the 6-hour contract have benefits.
6-hour contract
Yes.
have benefits? Okay, so they all have benefits?
They all have benefits.
Okay.
The one that does not have benefits is the sub-drivers.
Okay. All right. And so the other question that I have is regarding usage of both the GRTC program and MyStop. I'd be curious and wondering, do you have any sense of if ridership on our school buses has gone down as a result of the GRTC program?
They haven't distributed that.
No, I think in the process of implementing that at this point. So, no, not at this time.
Because I do think, I mean, $300,000 is a lot of money that the city is allocated for that, so I want to ensure that we continue to look at the cost benefit of both of those programs. And then the other usage question is regarding MyStop, and this is where I have my parent hat on. I just know as a parent, there's so many apps, right? So there's Obvious Link, and then there's MyStop, and there's Action, and I'm sure that I know Cluster Joe, and there are a lot of different ones. And so I wonder, I haven't heard among the circle of parents that I know that there's a lot of usage of the MyStop app. I'm wondering how has usage of that been?
I don't think it's a lot because it came out towards the end of the year. Yeah, I have a few parents, so I've gotten calls about how to go online to get it. And once they go online, it's the same process they use for getting the children's report cards and with the parents with those coaches that use the same item. So the coaches will use the school IT set it up so it will be easier for them to get that one code for it.
Dr. Sapini and Ms. Burke and Mr. Barlow.
Yeah, my question also has to do with the non-stop. For one, if someone has an issue with the app, who do they contact?
They can contact us. They can contact us and then we can direct it to the right person. Because it could be an IT problem with us or it could be an app problem. So we have to find out what problem it is first. Say for instance, the app could have an issue and it's not IT, it could be us, our IT department.
And we're working to improve the process. Some is coming from the past. We're looking at how do we get more usage out of the app, and what are the issues, the find out what the issues are, and try to improve that process.
There's been quite a few questions saying that I didn't lose that right. The IT group, or you guys?
All right.
Yeah, the question was that some of the questions that I've received pertaining to transportation had to do with the fact that the parents did not know who to contact, whether it was IT or transportation, because they weren't able to get any results.
Ms. Burke?
Thank you. Being a bus driver is a very difficult job. And just not here in the city of Richmond, but across the board, metro area period, the school systems are looking for bus drivers. But my concern is, number one, going back to what Ms. Stewart stated, we do need to look at ways in which to uplift our drivers, because oftentimes the level of respect is not there. And that also comes from the children, sometimes people in the community. But we do need to do a better job with that. I know when I used to ride the buses, the children would behave so well. And then to see the camera otherwise, which is a great, I hope all the cameras are working on all the buses, because that helps greatly. Going back also what Ms. Stewart was stating, so if we have bus drivers that are working 8 hours or 6 hours with benefits, if you're working as a cafeteria monitor or whatever, there are no benefits. But if you're already covered for 8 hours, you don't have to do that. I know at one time we had that in place. It didn't work well. in order to make the hours. Well, my other concern is being at Mason in the mornings, often and seeing that double run. We have children that don't always get to school on time, which means they are losing those first few minutes of their instructional period. And schools, just as Ms. Owens stated, and George Mason as well, academically, you're struggling. The first, how you start your day is how it's going to end often. So our children do need to be at school on time and in place. Then the opportunity to have breakfast, which I love the program that's in place in terms of eating in your classrooms. But we're playing catch up. So I do hope that we as a board get to the point where we can do more than $14 an hour. I don't know what else would work. You have insurance, you have $14 an hour, and also the longevity. We have some drivers that's been around for 25, 30 years, 40 years. I know one is Lisa, right? Yeah, she's awesome. She doesn't play. And the parents know her as well. So when we think in terms of the turnover there, there's something to think about also. Because it's not an easy job at all. So what can we do to better support our drivers' professional development, make them feel a part of the team? So, just as we do Teacher Appreciation Week, which is unfortunate, it's just one time a week, a year, but it is also a day of bus drivers here. But one day that's not enough. One week is not enough. We need to lift people up often, because oftentimes you put so much on their backs to do. And being a bus driver, your back is turned, and you're driving plus looking in the back, looking in the mirror. That's a difficult job. So I appreciate all that our drivers are doing. But with the same token, we need to do a better job, and maybe we can do that model for the metro area in terms of how to treat bus drivers. Because the bus drivers meet our children before they get in the classrooms. They are the first, that big young bus that can set your day or tear up your day based upon what happens on that bus. So that's really the first teacher of the day before they get into the cafeteria or the classroom. So I hope we do a better job of lifting them up and supporting them. And of course, money talks.
Mr. Marlowe?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate the data that you presented here. I think it's helpful for us to be able to take a look at before making decisions related to our bus issues. I do have a couple questions for you. One in particular with regard to the length of certain trips here. So I see that the minimum and maximum ride length for trips is anywhere from, the maximum can be anywhere from 59 minutes to 124 minutes. I'm particularly concerned to see that we may have exceptional education students in a car for 2 hours and a commute. So I was wondering if you have any details about why that would be possible.
Obviously, those were not inclusive of potentially students with exceptional education.
Can you speak in the mic, please?
So those, that range of numbers in terms of the route times from the shortest to the longest is inclusive of all the routes. And so some of those do include students who are on the exceptional education, and they have several stops at homes along the route. So there's a lot more stops for those bus routes, simply because the buses are stopping in many cases at the students' home, at each of the students' homes. So those route times are a little longer.
So, but there's a possibility, or is this an anomaly? Is this the longest ride length that an exceptional education student experienced last year? Or do we have students who are 2 hours per ride in a vehicle to get between school and home?
60% of the routes are 21 minutes or less.
Right.
Now, I'd have to go and look at the specific data for that particular run, but we just looked at the range just to kind of give you an idea of what that could be.
Okay, so I am very concerned, at least, to see that kind of number, if we have any student experiencing that regularly. The other piece is I see that many of our runs are much shorter.
I'm sorry, I just want to jump in. Mr. Miles, it's not my understanding that we regularly have multiple students at the 124-minute mark, that is the extreme. Is that accurate?
We really don't have student buses.
Okay, and can you just share a little bit more about the process for, my understanding when I inquired about this number, because it was startling to me as well, is that in some cases where we are picking up medically fragile students, the time involved is significant, particularly when there are multiple such students being picked up for places like Amelia Street. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay, it doesn't excuse, I want to be clear, it's still too long. But is that accurate?
That's correct. We have 5 wheelchairs on that one bus. Wheelchairs take much longer because the driver has to get off the bus, as well as the monitor stay on the bus. You have to bring the lift down, strap the child on it, lock it, then bring it back up and put the child in. Then you have to lock the child in with it. So if you do 5 of those, the route gets longer and longer. Now the ones that we're special children, we just go and pull them from the door, take out. Those are some quick, but the ones that we have to do multiple children with wheelchair. And when we go to Children's Hospital, we have children that very few that's got all kinds of medical issues that we have to take our time to get on because they're fresh. So that takes a little bit extra time.
Right, so, yeah, I appreciate the context, and I certainly would like to see any additional information that you have about that. Because if we have 5 students and that first student, it takes that 2 hours for that first student to get to school, then I certainly want to know if that needs to be remedied. The other piece is with regard to these double and triple runs. So I do think that it's pretty stark to see how many of these runs are happening in certain areas of the city in particular. But I am curious to what degree that reflects population density near schools. So I know that, for example, at Oak Road, we have a number of students who live near the school. So I would expect that a bus could get back a couple of times before some of the longer routes would make it to the school. So I think what may be more helpful data for me to see, and it sounds like we may be able to collect it because we have so much GPS data, would be how long the time period from the student getting to their stop to when class starts is. And then also how frequently those times that a bus is supposed to make it to a stop, they fail to. So those, to me, I think that may be a better indicator because if we have a bus that can make it 3 or 4 times and then one bus that's consistently late and dropping off the same students late all the time, then that would be very helpful to see.
Ms. Dorr, Mr. Young.
I'll yield to the board. I was going to make a point about all the different software expenditures, but I'll save that for budget season.
Mr. Young and Ms. Gibson.
Just real quick, how many families do we have signed up for My Stop? Thank you. Thanks.
Ms. Gibson.
I wanted to just also follow up on Mr. Barlow's question about the 124-minute average. When I saw that number and my jaw dropped, I thought too that it could be that we have some private day placements perhaps that are perhaps outside of city limits. So it would be helpful to know, how those are affecting that average as well.
Superintendent Cameron, if you could speak to the GRTC bus passes for our high school students, because yes, we appreciate that partnership and the opportunity for our high school students to have bus passes, but GRTC did not add additional routes to accommodate our students. So it did not have an impact on transportation for our students to and from school. If you could speak to that.
Well, I'll say we're certainly grateful for the partnership, and it should allow our high school students to experience more of Richmond, which we are delighted about. As for its effect on our ridership, you're right that no additional stops were put in place, which certainly would be an added benefit. My understanding, though, I defer to the transportation folks, is that we are still in the process of going through establishing all of the IDs and all the permissions and everything that needs to happen to be able to fully implement the program. So it is still early to be able to determine the actual impact. In fact, I believe we have on an upcoming agenda, and the clerk can correct me if I'm wrong, to share out some initial data.
Yes, and I'll be doing that, I believe, on the 15th. We'll have some data. Right now, we're working on these students, our participation points back, so we're doing our participation counts up. So the next phase of that is to begin to look at the data, to look at the ridership. We're not there yet. So we're at a phase where we're just getting students signed up. We've been getting students signed up for the last several weeks, since before school started, when we had back to school nights and that kind of thing. So it's in the process ongoing, and we just continue to do our participation results. So once students begin to get their passes, shoot their passes, we can look at and track data, how often they can utilize the
But also, I just wanted to say, and looking at this report, and looking at the double runs and the triple runs, I'm just outraged and looking at the data. But I want to turn that outrage into solution, being solution oriented. And I want this board to be thoughtful in creating solutions to improve equity in our school system and be intentional. Because in looking and doing research, this is not a new issue. This extends, it goes all the way back to 2004, and I believe in 2005, 2006, that's when changes were made. Those 45 drivers, so open enrollment became, you had to provide transportation for your child if you took advantage of open enrollment. And the reason why I know, because I was one of those parents at that time. But so every time a board has made changes to transportation, it has negatively impacted the school district and negatively impacted our students and disenfranchised our students who do not have accessibility, who parents may not have the means of transportation. So because of that, they don't have the ability. What's the use of having a specialty school when you can't apply because your parent can't get you to the hub stop? So I want this board to be intentional and thoughtful as we go through this process. Short-term and long-term planning. We can't continue to do this. And then we make changes to rezoning that created this fiasco. So I want us to be intentional in our planning and having that discussion with GRTC to really create a partnership with the school system. Because when we were down in Nashville, they have a partnership with their transit system. So, you know, and I've talked to in all the localities, I've talked to school board members in Henrico. So they have a hub location, but the child still rides the zone bus, the neighborhood bus, but that neighborhood bus takes them to that zone, the hub location. So I want us to be intentional and thoughtful in our planning. Because open enrollment is really not open enrollment. Access to the specialty schools is really not access if you can't get to that hub location. We had a parent, he was a parent, Justin, the RTV reporter, London and myself, we walked 2.7 miles to get to the hub location. It took us an hour. And I thought I was about to pass out. But if your child has to get to the hub stop at 6 o'clock in the morning, that means your child had to walk the streets at 5 o'clock in the morning. We gotta do better. Dr. Sapini?
In line with what you just said, and the fact that for the past few meetings we've been talking about the same issue as far as rezoning and so on. I'd like to move that we begin that discussion sooner rather than later, so that we can get the ball rolling and not have to go by scrambling now that we have 3 new schools on the way.
Second.
It's been moved by Dr. Sapini and seconded by Ms. Cosby to move the discussion about rezoning.
Madam Chair, point of clarification here, I certainly want to see more discussion about rezoning as soon as is reasonable, but I think that the motion that you made, Dr. Spina, was a little ambiguous as far as when you'd like to start. So it's tough for me. Sure, I can make a symbolic vote that I want to start sooner, but it doesn't really provide me much detail about what our intentions are.
Yes, I'd say that starting with our next board meeting that we have rezoning on the agenda and begin to learn about the process so that we can better be prepared. And that discussion needs to go on each and every meeting if we have to get it done sooner rather than later.
If I may, as I believe we previously discussed, our timeline was to begin that process in early 2019. I want to serve the board well, and so I want to be frank that we are not in a position right now to begin that discussion in any thoughtful way. So while I certainly share, Dr. Spina, your sense of urgency, and Ms. Cosby, you've shared this, and others as well, I think that doing this hastily would perhaps be worse than not doing it at all. And so this is going to require quite a significant effort, not just internally, but to likely procure the services of demographers and others, which, as you know, going through the normal procurement timelines and such is going to take quite some time. So again, we are 100% committed to this process. It is in the strategic plan, but we are not prepared to do any thoughtful conversation on this topic at the next meeting, or frankly, at any meeting over the next couple of months.
Ms. Burke?
I agree with the superintendent in the 7th district, in the East End in particular. There are so many new apartments, so many houses being built, and our population is going to soar. So many babies in the area. I hope they will embrace Richmond Public Schools. But I think we need to, at some point, get professional development regarding zoning. But at this time, I would like to see some stability in our neighborhoods. I know we have a new George Mason coming, but to, and is that going to solve, to rezone, is that the answer to the problem? The problem right now is we don't have enough bus drivers, correct? Yeah, so is rezoning going to, so if we bus children from South Side to East End or the West End or whatever, is that going to solve the problem? And we did away with 45 drivers. So right now to rezone, is that going to solve, what is the issue? Is the issue to rezone to get drivers? Or is the issue to rezone because of buildings being heavy, but we're building the schools? I'm not clear on just what is rezoning at this point going to solve.
Ms. Dorr?
So I appreciate the urgency around this, and I do think that we need to right-size our schools. We've got some schools with 25 portable classrooms and others that are not at capacity, so I do see a value in rezoning. I think given the superintendent's remarks and given the fact that we had talked about starting this January 2019, we're talking about a difference of 3 months. I won't support this, although I do appreciate the emphasis on the urgency around this, and I want to support it in spirit. But given the very real capacity constraints of our administration, the fact that we're going through budget season, I think as long as we're committed to starting at Q1 2019, then I'm fine with not supporting this at this time.
Ms. Cosby?
Thank you, Dr. Spini. And so I support it, and I support having a conversation or starting the conversation sooner rather than later, because it is a huge task. And issues keep coming up that ultimately some part of it does have to do with rezoning in terms of fixing it. So no, will rezoning fix everything with transportation? No, you're right. Ms. Burke, yes, we do need more bus drivers. However, I think when we start to talk about exactly what you said, what's coming up, what's being built, the city plan, we need to start having these conversations. When we start talking about facilities, even with our priority list with facilities and where we place our money, going back to budget. So are we going to have, are we going to take a school offline? Are we going to keep it? Are we going to invest money in a school that is under capacity right now? And right now we have a priority list of facilities, and this is how we want to spend our money, and this is what we're saying. But it really does beg the question: would it be wise for us to do this or not? And some things we probably can't answer well without going through this process. And it's not to say that, yes, the process is going to be within 3 months or we're going to be finished. Oh, absolutely not. But to even have a conversation about what is needed, what do we have to start thinking about? Even talking about a calendar so that when we have a new school that comes online, that we would have looked at new developments. We would have looked at trend data and demographic data, where we're going to see increases. Because quite frankly, the data that we have right now is wrong. I mean, we say that there's no increase in the north side. There is. It is flat, but there is an increase in the north side. So to have conversations like that, just to start us thinking, what is it that we're going to need? What is it that we're going to, what is the timing going to look like, et cetera. I don't think there's anything wrong with having those conversations now.
Ms. Gibson?
Thank you. And I think that I would support looking at this sooner rather than later. And I am entirely sympathetic too to the fact that we have a lot of initiatives and the internal team has a lot on their plates. I think as a starting point, it might be helpful if we were to have an agenda item at either the next or after that, to just start at looking at what happened before. Because I think one of the things that our district is challenged with is just the continual turnaround, and we don't often we aren't always able to take the time and see what have we tried and what happened. And I think if we would just have a discussion to look at the process that was used last time, so that we can understand what was spent and what was not spent, and and how the community was engaged in the process. I think that would be very helpful for me. I mean, I remember participating in an online survey as a parent, but it would be, I think it would be interesting to understand, what has rezoning looked like in the district. My other, I think, motivation in doing it sooner is that, it's not a secret to say that this is something that is often politically unpopular to do. And I think that what we would want to avoid is having it align too much with with the election. We want people to make decisions based on what we feel like is the right thing to do, and not what, and nobody thinks that that's going to obviously impact their decision, but elections are elections, and I think the closer that we do this so that it doesn't overlap with an election, the more likely we'll reflect, moving in a direction that we feel like is sometimes it's not a politically popular thing to do, but that we feel like it's what's the right thing to do.
Ms. Dorr?
So I think if it's a preliminary kind of calendaring, what do we need to get our ducks in a row conversation, I think that's fine. I think, I wonder if, as part of that conversation, we talk about, does it make sense to have a working group on rezoning to start putting together the calendar for next year, which I would be fine with starting now or at a future time. But if that's what we're talking about, then I think that's all well and good, and then we're able to hit the ground running when the administration has the capacity to take it on.
I just want to, if I may, be clear about expectations for such a discussion. So even to do a retrospective, which I like, is going to take significant work. As I think is evident, records, data haven't always been kept as well as we would like at RPS. And so even constructing what happened in the past takes a significant amount of energy, staff time. And so if that is a conversation that the board can have without the administration preparing any presentation, I welcome that. If the board is expecting a presentation from the administration on what has occurred in the past, I want to be clear that we are not prepared to do that anytime soon. If it is the will of the board and you direct me to do so, certainly, of course, I will. That being said, then certain things are going to come off the plate. And so as we think of the breadth of activities that are currently going on, some things are going to have to be deprioritized, and I would have to be very honest with the board about what that is. Because, again, we were planning, as discussed previously, to begin this process in January. Again, if the board wants to have a discussion without the administration doing any legwork, without us running down numbers and data and all this, of course, we would welcome that. But I want to impress upon the board that even this deck we're looking at on transportation took dozens of hours to put together, given the state of our data systems. And so I want to make sure that we do good work. I've often shared, as you know, one of our values is excellence, and so I try to provide the board with excellence, and it just takes time. So I want to be honest with you all about that, so that we can manage expectations going forward.
Ms. Owen?
Okay, I'm just gonna stick an oar in here. We're gonna look at some reports tonight. We have much more important things to do in the next couple of months. We need to talk again about student achievement. We need to talk about the instruction that's going on in our schools right this red hot minute. That's what we need to be doing right now. I agree, the rezone is going to be, it's going to be a mess, it's going to be hard work, and I think wait until after the current election is a really good idea. So let's get back to what we are about. We are primarily about the instruction our students are receiving and how they're going to achieve. And the rezoning is going to take a while, no matter when we start it. So we need to look at these reports that we're about to be given. And I think we need to dive into them. I know we're not going to dive into them tonight because it's too long. They're too long. But that's the priority. What we need to do to get our students the best possible education we can do anything about. That's just my 2 cents.
Ms. Cosby?
Thank you, Ms. Owen, and I would just say that when we talk about equity, when we talk about instructional excellence, rezoning is not outside of that. It is a part of it. Even when you look at some of our schools, that are bursting at the seams. And we question whether our students are receiving equitable instruction in those buildings, et cetera. It does go back to rezoning. So rezoning is not outside of educational excellence whatsoever. I just wanted to be clear about that. Thank you.
I just want to add, I understand the sense of urgency to rezoning. But I don't want to make a hasty decision and then we repeat the same mistakes of our predecessors. Because we know that rezoning takes about 12 to 18 month process. And just as some of my colleagues have said around this table, we got a housing development, the growth throughout the city, the feeder patterns, student growth. There's a lot of factors that we have to consider, and I just don't want to rush in making this decision. And we know we have our plate this full. But student achievement, yes, rezoning impacts all of them, but we've got to keep our focus on the student achievement. Trying to move in this district forward. Because the reports that we all want to receive tonight are heart-wrenching. Mr. Barlow?
I want to start by saying I think it's extremely important that we begin the process of rezoning as soon as is feasible. My hope is that some of these discussions would have started earlier on in our tenure as school board members, but we are now at a juncture where we've just entered into, or we're finalizing an improvement plan. We do have the feedback from these audits. We are a couple months or a month and change into the first school year of many of our administrators. I do think that there is a lot for us to work on at this point. I do think that there may be an opportunity if we are talking about having some discussion without requiring a bunch of legwork and feedback from the administration at this phase, to at least talk about what some of our goals may be with rezoning. What are some of the key tenets that we think we should be addressing? How do we think as a board we should go about getting community feedback? And things of that nature. So perhaps we could put a discussion point on the calendar for one of the next couple of meetings to at least have some of those broader policy discussions. But I agree with the superintendent at this point that if we are if we're overburdening ourselves with that task in the next 2 months, particularly given that we're also preparing for budget season, we also have to be watching out for what's going on with the legislature. We hope to be getting advocacy campaigns together with other community groups in order to advocate for more resources and things of that nature. That I just think we've got a lot going on in the next couple of months. If we're talking about starting 2 months later, starting Q1, or be it 2.5 months later, or whatever, then I think that's a request that we should respect as a board.
Call the question.
A motion was made by Dr. Sapini, seconded by Ms. Cosby to leave the discussion regarding rezoning to begin at the October 15th board meeting. Ms. Dorr?
No.
Mr. Marlowe?
No.
Ms. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Ms. Cosby?
Yes.
Mrs. Burke?
No.
Ms. Owen?
No.
Dr. Sapini?
Yes.
Mrs. Page?
No.
Motion fails 4-5.
But what I do want to ask of the board, because based on the conversations around the table, we can start to have that discussion during our work session. Just as Mr. Waldo said, what would be some of the board's goals, the key tenets in this process for rezoning? Is there a consensus around adding that item to the agenda during the work sessions to start having that discussion as a board? So the administration would have direction on how to move forward with this process. All right. Next item.
The next item is 4.02, receive the budget and equity audits.
As I believe certainly the board knows and the public knows, in my 100-day plan I called for 2 audits, one of our budget and finance practices and another on the state of equity, or as it is, inequity in RPS as it pertains to academics and a set of other areas. I'm formally presenting those audits this evening. The first from the Council of Great City Schools, and again for the public, the Council of Great City Schools is the consortium of the largest urban school districts in the United States, of which Richmond is a member district. The equity audit was performed by the Education Trust, which is a national organization which has been advocating for greater equity on behalf of children of color and low-income children for many, many years. As I've already shared publicly and as I shared with you, the audits are nothing short of heartbreaking. They paint a very stark and painful reality about both the state of many of our operational systems and also the state of inequity in Richmond public schools. These are both rather lengthy reports, and so I will not attempt to summarize here. They both have summaries, and certainly, I know many of you have already had the opportunity to begin to peruse these, but I want to make sure the board has ample time to review and discuss. I'll just say a few points this evening and then of course answer any questions. One, certainly on the budget and finance audit, some of the issues that have been raised we have begun to tackle already. And I did want to note that, for example, some structural pieces were documented in a report from the summertime, which have already been addressed. There are other factors like that. And second, I wanted to note that I'm very proud of the work that the community did and the board did in crafting our strategic plan, because I do believe it has many key actions which speak directly to many of the findings in both of these reports. Third, I'll say, as we are doing the work of pricing out the strategic plan and developing a year-by-year timeline for our efforts to tackle every action in the strategic plan, having both of these audits will be extremely helpful as we think about those elements, and certainly we will be referencing them along the way. And then last, I'll just say, these were very difficult to read. And I want to be absolutely clear, there's nothing wrong with the kids of RPS. We, the adults who are charged with caring for them, have not done right by them for too many years. I think it's a combination of mismanagement, dysfunction, chronic and immoral underfunding, differential expectations for kids from different backgrounds. And despite the very painful news that these reports have brought to us, I don't think any of this is actually news for people who have spent time, such as yourselves with RPS. And I am glad that we undertook these reports so that we could have so starkly in front of us on the printed page the challenge before us. And I'll close by saying addressing these issues, like tackling our strategic plan, is going to require us to do some difficult things, difficult decisions. Change requires change. And so as we embark on tackling these issues and our strategic plan, what I ask of the board is support as we make big and bold changes. And it is impossible to make big and bold changes without ruffling feathers along the way. And so I think there are harder days ahead of us as we do the work of leaning into these challenges, fixing them and addressing them on behalf of our kids. So in advance of all that, I say thank you.
Mr. Marlowe, then Mr. Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your remarks, Mr. Cameras. I particularly like the change requires change line. I think Yogi Berra would have been proud. But I will say these definitely were disheartening to read through. I was rereading both of them today in my office before I came here, and I had two people ask if everything was okay. That's kind of a pretty good indicator of the reality of the situation. And I'll say, we know, and we have known that there are significant equity issues in our school district. We certainly know and have known that there are significant finance and operations issues in our district. And so it doesn't come as that big a shock to me that we got reports that reflected that. But now it feels like we know where the bodies are buried. So I'm glad that we got them done. I'm glad that we took the issue head on and that you called for these audits in your 100-day plan. And I'm glad that we'll be in a position to begin taking swift action on them.
Mr. Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief. RPS has been grossly mismanaged for a really, really long time. And though the audit was difficult to read, candidly, it wasn't surprising. And I am pleased that we have a board and we have a leadership team in place that is prepared to depart from the status quo. To that end, Madam Chair, if you and my colleagues would indulge me, I propose that we do demonstrate a sense of urgency, and I would move that as a first step we adopt the audit's recommendation, referring to the Council of Great City Schools recommendation to reconvene the audit committee, that we reestablish the audit committee as recommended with the relevant scope of work, along with composition thereto as recommended in the Council of Great City Schools.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Young and seconded by Ms. Cosby.
The motion was made by Mr. Young and seconded by Ms. Cosby to reestablish the audit committee provided by Council of Great City Schools audit.
Recommended.
I'm sorry.
Recommended.
That's enough of that. And recommended. As recommended.
One clarification for you, Mr. Young. So I know that the I believe the report said that the audit committee would be sort of constructed from a group of citizens, potential finance professionals, school board members. So it sounded like a pretty broad group. I'm assuming that we're not deciding on a composition of that at this point, but that we're just voting to reestablish it.
Correct, Madam Chair. Mr. Barlow. That's my intent to, between now and when we next convene on the 15th, that we would develop a proposal relative to the size, preferred composition. I think the scope of work was adequately defined by the audit to include, for example, I think it was A to H. I think there were about 10, something like that, recommendations included within that audit committee's jurisdiction, if you will. But no, I'm not prepared this evening to get into the weeds and suggest all of the other details. I think that's something that can be done between now and the 15th, if the board agrees. But I do think it's very important that we demonstrate a sense of urgency this evening relative to that audit.
So, point of clarity, and maybe Mr. Wood maybe ready to comment from the finance committee. That is one of the functions in the finance committee to also implement the audit, some audit recommendations and improvements.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, thanks for that. I had an opportunity to converse with a couple of you just as earlier today. And for me, it's really important, though I want to acknowledge the outstanding work done by the Finance Committee, for me it's really important that we distinguish, not unlike when we had the conversation earlier about the auditor and the job description, that we distinguish this bodies of work from the Finance Committee, because I would not want to limit it to just finance-related processes, but rather that it's more exhaustive to include all the kinds of things that that audit addressed. Because granted, some of them pertain specifically to dollars and cents, appropriations, etc., but a lot of those I would never characterize as the appropriate purview being the Finance Committee. And frankly, I think it sends a really important signal that this body, that the school board is invested in the kind of change that the superintendent rightly spoke to earlier.
Ms. Dorr?
Yeah, I think there was an audit committee comprised of school board members and community leaders at one point in time. I think around 2004 time frame.
Prior to me coming on the board. And so just to give another point of clarity, so the audit committee recommendations during that time was to direct the auditor to perform more than just the student activity funds, but to create an audit work plan, to create the risk assessments, and based on those risk assessments, that's how we prioritize the functions of the system. So, and that was previously stated when we talked about posting the auditor's position. So I just want to provide clarity to the board. Because that's something that the board would be approving, the audit work plan. Ms. Dorr and Ms. Owen.
So I'm in support of, I think we need to do some thinking about how it relates to, so we're not in sort of having multiple committees saying different things. So, but I'm absolutely in support of bringing in our partners in the community that want to lend a helping hand to help us address some of the things in the audit report. My add is that the Council on Great City Schools recommended that the external audit committee include professionals within finance and accounting. I feel really strongly that we need professionals within procurement, because I felt like that was a huge part of the report that we are just we're in the bottom quartile for almost everything. So I don't think we need to amend the motion necessarily, but just I feel very strongly that we need to focus on procurement in addition to the finance and accounting.
I just want to note that the administration welcomes the formation of this committee, and we will be glad to have all the expertise we can possibly get.
I just,
Ms. Owen.
yeah, I just wanted to, this is recommendation 10 under exhibit 32, I guess, or under the business operations. The recommendation is just for those. And it has A through G as sub-things. I just want to be sure that we're not already adopting all of those, because there are some specific things in there I think we would need more time to consider, such as employing the outside independent firm and getting some more people to work with them. You know, maybe we're going to start the committee, but we're not doing A through G. Am I clear on that? Is that right?
Right, because also, if there's the will of the board to establish an audit committee, we have to establish the scope of work. So that's, that's going to provide additional conversation around that, the scope of work.
Yeah.
Ms. Young.
Ms. Lilla just said precisely that thing, that I would consider that a friendly amendment. So yes, that we would establish a committee and the scope of work. Yes, ma'am, what you just said.
Mr. Barlow.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I was playing with Mike.
Ms. Gibson.
As it pertains to the budget, the Council of Great City Schools audit, I think one thing, and there are many things that were, that stood out reading the document. One of which was the sentiment from staff that, they just kind of put their head down and, just try to get through the day. That was really disheartening to read. And I bring that up because I think it is important for us as we, take perspective on it, to appreciate that that's not something that just happened. This is, these issues are ongoing, and, it is a culture that has pervaded the system for some time. And so I support the committee. And because there are a lot of very prescriptive changes that I think that the committee structure would be able to address. But I also think that, as we think about the culture and those other pieces, I lean on the administration to look at, how that comes to light. And I do think that it is very much by being transparent and allowing folks to be able to be honest about what they can do and what they can't do. And so that is the thought I have on that. The other thing, on an unrelated note, is the fact that we haven't been completing building inspections, annual building inspections. We have, that needs to, the safety of our children, and so that definitely stood out as something that needs to be addressed right away.
I just want to appreciate the comments by Ms. Gibson. I do think there are certainly a number of technical fixes that need to take place, but there's an underlying cultural issue that needs to be addressed. And I think being honest about what folks can and can't do is important. I do try to model that, which is why I shared that I was not prepared, and the administration would not be prepared to move forward with the rezoning, I really want folks to feel that they can articulate, what the capacity they have to do the work in front of us. I have found by and large, people want to do great work and be successful. And I see it as my job to clear those obstacles and allow them to be successful. And so over time, this is clearly a priority for us to make sure that the culture in City Hall and beyond is one where folks not only have the permission, but are encouraged to creatively problem solve, to raise their hand when there's an issue and say, we need help, because we certainly can't do this alone.
Ms. Cosby?
Thank you, Superintendent Cameras. And so I too am looking forward to a culture shift and one that is open and values everyone. And also, I hope that along with this culture shift, that this report really talks about communication as well. So culture and communicating and everybody being on the same page and having a common goal is very important. So I'm excited about moving forward in that direction. And also, we also have to, in reading this report too, yes, it's very much about long-standing issues that have just culminated over the years, but also and how we address some new things that we may have to rethink and not be afraid to do that as well.
And last comment, I just want board members to keep in mind as if the will of the board is to establish audit committee, I want us to keep in mind the scheduling of the committee meetings. Because I know before we had decided like the last week of the month, because we also have to take into consideration the use of staff's time for their participation with the health advisory, the finance committee, because they are the experts. They will be preparing the work, so I would hope that the board will also keep that in mind as we plan our committee meetings. Call the question.
The motion was made by Mr. Young, seconded by Ms. Cosby, to reestablish the audit committee as recommended by the Council for the City Schools audit and to discuss the scope of work for the committee. Ms. Moore? Yes. Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Ms. Gibson? Yes. Mr. Young? Ms. Cosby? Yes. Mrs. Burke? Yes. Ms. Owens? Yes. Dr. Sapini?
Yes.
Ms. Page? Yes. Motion passes 9-0. The next item is item 6, your board action item. 6.01, receive for action a request for renewal of instructional software for math, science, and literacy. Good morning, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, Superintendent, board members. Okay, good morning. It always feels like Tuesday, doesn't it? So there are procurement procedures, these are power board approval for certain services over $250,000, and these are services and products that have been in place for RPS, and so we are asking for contract renewal for the products that exceed this threshold. Coming into this role and exploring lots of requests for renewal, I spent the last month with my team looking at every instructional product and subscription, at least instructional technology subscription that we provide, and have went to schools and asked for, to what extent do you use these products? Are these products used school-wide? Are they more class-specific? Do you need a division-wide license or more school-specific licenses?
there is a list of many different products that have accumulated over the years. And so our team is doing the work of pulling those apart one by one, but in close communication with our schools and principals, because we certainly do not want to take away something that is utilized heavily by teachers as they're trying to make sort of short-term decisions. So that's just some context around how we're thinking about broader product renewal for instructional resources in general. And then sort of specifically with these products, we also looked at how much use is there, how much is the quality of the product, do we have a well-developed plan for implementation, training, and support, so that these products are not just purchased and sitting on an online shelf, if you will, but they're actually utilized. And then to what extent these products align with curriculum and instructional priorities and the needs in terms of instructional areas. So as we look at all of this, even for those items that do not require board approval, we've been looking at those purchases, be they $10,000 or $250,000. Over the course of this year, we are going to be doing a broader, deeper evaluation and really looking at every single product to ensure that there's not just usage or teacher interest or school interest, but there's also validated impact that goes along with these products. So that's so with these two particular areas, one is for tutoring services and one is for a math and science instructional resource tool that is used K-12, hence the larger amount because it's such a large, so many site licenses. For tutoring services, as you all know, we provide a number of services in tutoring across many funding sources. What we're talking about today are two specific funding sources that are earmarked by state code. One is the Algebra Readiness Initiative, and the other is the Early Reading Initiative. The Algebra Readiness Initiative is a dedicated fund earmarked by the state to support students in grades 6 through 9 who are at risk of failing the algebra as a course exam. As the equity audit just pointed to, algebra readiness is a real challenge for our students.
Historically, we have provided tutors to students. The state requires a ratio of 10 to 1 for tutoring, for small group tutoring, to provide extra time on task for students to get instructional support. So part one of this is, historically, last year we hired these all internally, and this process was managed by a part-time employee. We have, through the reorg that you all approved back in the summer, this is now a full-time position because the stakes are so high. So we have a full-time position that will be releasing for a math intervention specialist to oversee this initiative, as well as the tutoring. By contracting with the public consulting group, they go through a very rigorous selection process, including ensuring that their tutors all take the Algebra 1 end of course exam, and that they are trained in specific tutoring techniques. And given the limited capacity and bandwidth historically within our division, I cannot say with confidence that we had any documented or robust tutoring training provided for any hires that we did direct. So by outsourcing this, we've historically used public consulting group for tutoring in other funds, and by focusing our work with public consulting group in these two areas, it allows us to work with them and really have quality control of the tutors who are coming into the building. If you ask our principals for feedback, they will tell you that there is a range of quality that they've historically experienced with tutors, and unfortunately, there tends to be a trend line with certain providers or those that we've hired internally, because that is not yet a core competence within our division in terms of hiring effective tutors. The Early Reading Initiative is for students in our lower grades, and grades K through 2 specifically. And this is, again, an earmarked program funded by the state. The difference between this and the Algebra Readiness Initiative is the Algebra Readiness funds are completely provided by the state. EIRI funds are a matching fund, so they were already earmarked in our budget. So that gives us a total budget of about $1.6 million annually for this effort. And essentially, just not to reinforce what's already here, but again, historically, these tutors were hired locally. The tutors had a whole range of expectations. There was a part-time person who was hired back in March, but prior to, there was limited oversight and support of this role. We've since hired a dedicated person to design and oversee this program. And we believe, again, by outsourcing the hiring and training of tutors, we can then focus on the programmatic delivery for our tutors and work with our schools to make sure that our schools are using our tutors effectively. The last thing I'll say about the tutoring services is this is something that our schools have really come to rely on, particularly in our lower grades where we do not have instructional aides in every classroom, and in particularly K-2 classrooms, you typically need another adult in the classroom almost full-time so that you can do things like small group guided reading and small group interventions. And these funds allow us, while they certainly do not take the place of a full-time IA, they do allow us to get students that additional small group instruction that they otherwise wouldn't be able to get given our current staffing levels. Finally, I'll just say that last year, we spent $1.5 million on the early reading initiative, including $390,000 of that for supplies. So this is consistent with practice. The main pivot is working with a trusted ongoing partner that we've had to provide quality tutoring selection, training, and oversight while we focus on the programmatic delivery. And then lastly, I'll just say with tutoring, I think that there are many ways that we can support our students who require additional support in math and reading. But because our schools have come to rely on these services, we did not feel that we've had enough time to really engage and dialogue with both our principals and our teachers about the impact of rolling back the level of tutoring that they've come to rely on in these specific initiatives. So that's a pause for tutoring before we go to the other product.
Could you just speak to our longer term strategy and the role that tutoring will play and where we are in that strategy?
Sure. So, first, the longer term strategy needs to be grounded in significantly overhauling our core instruction. So no amount of tutoring and interventions can make up for poor or inadequate daily, what we call regular core instruction. So that's step one, and that takes a long time. That means overhauling our curriculum. That means looking at our instructional day, our instructional minutes, the structure of our math and reading blocks, etc. So that's kind of foundation. We then need to build what's called a response to intervention or a more tiered intervention strategy, where it's very clear based on what your needs are, you get an increasing level of intensive interventions, such that the smallest number of students who need the most get the most intensive from the most expert teachers with a very prescribed series of interventions. Students who are in the middle get a different set of resources, and then students who just need day-to-day support typically get that from their core teacher. RPS has not had a codified response to intervention model. I'd say that this is fairly standard practice for any well-functioning school system for the last 10 years is to have a response to intervention model. The absence of this is also probably likely tied to our high special education referral rates as well. So when we hired our manager of student supports and interventions, who's just been on about a month, one of her primary functions is to build a more coherent and systematic tiered level of supports with very clearly defined benchmarks and identifiers for when students qualify for certain interventions. And those interventions would be defined and not left up to the individual knowledge or expertise or skill set or capacity of an individual teacher who already has so much on their plate just to provide strong core instruction throughout the day. Does that answer your question?
Ms. Owen?
Okay. So the people who have been tutors working for RPS will no longer be tutors working for RPS unless they are then hired by this company.
So we have 2 tutoring contracts. well, I should say the other one is a tutoring provider. We do not have a formal contract. It's on a as-needed basis. That's Axiom. So tutors for these particular programs, they will be and are being directed to apply through once approved, I'm assuming we need this approved, but they will be directed to apply through PCG to be placed. And we've also let principals know that if there was a tutor in their building who, through one of these two funds, that they felt was very strong, to make sure that we were aware of that so they wouldn't lose who they perceived to be a good tutor, but they would probably make it through the vetting process. Thank you.
Mr. Young?
I remember when Barbara Sipe from Next Up was here last time, she had some pretty good data relevant to pre-test, post-test. Students have been participating in the program and what their new scores look like. Do we have any evidence, either anecdotal or empirical, relative to these programs, and if these programs, this 1.6 million, is actually moving the needle?
I wish I could say that we do. Right now, we do not. And my theory on that is because we have added humans, we added bodies, for lack of a better term, but without a lot of clarity, guidance, or definition about what they are supposed to do. A principal who is well established in their role and is able to manage the complexities of the school day can direct those tutors and direct those tutors well. A brand new principal or a principal who's overwhelmed by a number of challenges may not have the ability or capacity on their leadership team to direct those resources. So absent guidance or clarity from the division, it's not surprising that we haven't seen greater increases in math results or greater increases in third grade reading levels. It is my hope to, at least by adding some structure this year and adding some quality control and some defined programs, that we can now better test that and really figure out how else we might really make the case whether tutors are or are not adding value. But right now, I did not feel that we had enough information to pull away such a significant resource and support that students, teachers, and principals have come to rely on. It is certainly not my preference to stand before you and request you to approve this level of dollars without that data, but it is where we are.
Ms. Dorr?
Sorry if I missed this. So prior to this initiative that you're proposing, we were just hiring tutors and just putting them into buildings without any structure. So this essentially enables us to have some quality control on our tutors. Is that sort of the gist of this?
That is the gist of this.
Okay. And then my second question is, these are state funds, correct?
Correct.
So they're not coming from the city, and they have to specifically be earmarked for tutoring.
Correct. So specifically for ARI, that is fully funded by state funds. Early reading, it requires a match. So half of that amount is matched, and it is earmarked in the budget that you all adopted.
Ms. Gibson?
Thank you. My question is, in terms of the eligibility numbers, so I'm curious to know two things. How many students are eligible this year versus last year in the program? And the second part of the question is, by moving to outsourcing this, does that impact the number of students that we are able to work with in the program?
To answer your second question, no, because each year we've actually had rollover funds, so we've actually not even spent the full amount. Your first question, I can get that. We have a whole spreadsheet by school and by data that tells what the allotment is based on the student. So EIRI is based on PALS data, and there's a whole formula that gets plugged in and how the allotment gets determined by school. And then for ARI, it's based on SOL data and the number of students who did not pass that. So I can get you that after this.
question, one other question.
Ms. Gibson?
And so, as I understand, so Richmond Public Schools has worked with PCG before. Do you know why the district stopped working with them, or if they're still in contract with them?
No, they worked with, so PCG was, there were 3 tutoring companies, PCG, Axiom, and Catapult, that were providing services in the 17-18 school year. I can't speak to how far back that goes. They had different types of agreements, some which are formal contracts, some of which were, for lack of a better term, pay as you go. PCG was primarily used for Title I tutoring, and that's not what we're talking about today. So there's also a whole set of funds used for tutoring in Title I funds, and a whole set of funds that schools will use extended day funds for tutors. So among those 3, there was some different combination of those. We chose to go with PCG in this case because when we sat down and really asked them and took, when we got feedback from principals about where quality was the strongest, when we asked them their criteria and process for selecting and training, and just overall mission alignment, PCG and then Axiom is sort of our primary go-to. We're meeting with Catapult next week to discuss our future work with them. But PCG and Axiom were just much more, I would say we could get a very clear sense of what their training and support plans were. And since we've already had contracts with them, these are just defining the scopes and simplifying it to say, well, let's work with this group here so we can identify, again, quality. If you've got 3 tutoring companies providing tutors to the same programs, it's hard to suss out where the impact is. So by simplifying and saying, these are the 2 areas that we will specifically use PCG for, it allows us to really manage that a bit tighter, whereas schools can access other providers for their Title I funds and their extended day funds. Again, all things that I hope that we will have a much more comprehensive strategy on a year from now, or 6 months from now, well before we go into the school year, so that principals can plan accordingly. But did not want to totally disrupt this given my limited knowledge on the matter coming into the school year.
I just want to reiterate this last point that Dr. Epp made, which is, as an instructional matter, we don't love the idea of relying upon tutors at the costs of hundreds of thousands of dollars to move the needle. We want to ultimately invest those dollars into RPS staff, whether that's, as Dr. Epp said, instructional assistants in the K-2 classrooms. The challenge we face is balancing the time it takes to do the legwork on making that shift with where we are in a given school year. And the last thing we want to do is pull a resource out of a school that teachers and principals are expecting without ample warning. And so we would have to have had a robust plan for, instead of tutors this year, everybody has an extra instructional assistant. I'm making that up. And so we want to be able to do that work going forward, but that takes time, and we have to do that thoughtfully with teachers and principals. So this is a half measure on our path towards that more robust Tier 1 instructional program.
Mr. Young?
Yeah, well, that was really well said, and I really appreciate that, because at the risk of pointing out the obvious, and this 1.6 million is really essentially what we were critiqued for in the Council of Great City Schools audit. i.e. not doing cost-benefit analysis, not identifying what kind of return on the investment we're getting for those dollars. But I do concur with what the superintendent just said, and I'm going to vote for this, and I'm only going to vote for it because we are adopting a new approach relative to what we're going to do in this academic year. But I look forward to going forward a more robust, substantive evaluation of if we're actually getting any bang for the buck. And candidly, I'm very skeptical about it.
Ms. Gibson?
One last request, perhaps moving forward, and will be helpful with this, I think, when, for purchases like this, especially with this large ticket item, if it is possible to have, to get the documentation and have a meeting before, because I just want to make sure that I've, done my homework, and if it's possible to include the contract with this, so that we can, if we are so inclined to review the contract, just to, again, and not just for my benefit, but I think for the community, right, so that that becomes a document, and it's for transparency and all of that. That would be my interest.
Okay. And once it's adopted, the contract is available in the public search, but I can make sure we include that in the board docs.
Ms. Burke?
Having had the opportunity to work with ERI tutors for years, however, the kind of action was different. Title I totally supported it, and Title I supervised and trained the tutors, which mostly were either college students or retired teachers. And it was most effective. There was data in place in the past where you see growth. And it does make a big difference, especially with pre-K through 3 at one time, but now you're saying pre-K through 2. You're not doing third grade anymore.
We're focusing our efforts on K2.
So what happens to those children that move on to grade 3 but are not academically online? Do they have?
They'll still get support, but the bulk of the effort is in K2.
All right, so they will get that as well. Okay, all right. And my other question is, PCG, years ago, it was companies merged, and they were excellent tutors. Excellent tutors. The company trained them. I don't know what happened after I retired, and they didn't come back. But I'm glad that we have the opportunity. That's Jim Park, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an excellent. They come trained. They come ready to work, and it relieves the teachers. This is going to be after school for algebra.
Algebra will be both during the school day and after school. EIR will be during the school day.
Yes, that's their excellent choices. Thank you so much.
I just want to just make a statement. I'll make a clarifying point that because we've had this conversation before surrounding contracts, so all contracts are listed on the RPS website. For one of our right. So I know we've had that discussion several times.
Should I move on to we'll do group action or individual action? Okay. Area 2, math and science, instructional resource tools. So there are many instructional, tech-enabled instructional products that our teachers and schools utilize to help enhance teachers' planning and delivery of instruction. Most of them are much lower than this dollar figure. This is one of our rare K-12 comprehensive products. So this is Explore Learning Gizmos and Reflexes. Gizmos is a resource that provides our math and science teachers a massive library of interactive online simulations that teachers integrate into their daily lessons that really provide incredible content, expertise, and instruction with supporting tools for students to then, it has a full lesson plan in a lot of cases. So this really supports our teachers in preparing for daily lessons and designing lessons that utilize the smart boards that we have in many of our classrooms and designing lessons that are just much more interactive, engaging, and encourage our students to bring alive their inquiry. So this is for math and science classes, and then Reflexes is a math-specific tool for K-8 that is really around math practice and math fluency. As our math standards change and are really focusing on deep conceptual and understanding, it's also important that our students do not lose math fluency. And so Reflexes enables students to do that in really fun and sort of cumulative review type ways. In addition to a division-wide access, there's a set of schools that we're focusing. I've shared with you all before. with much of our pilots and work moving towards a bright spot model, where there's a small subset of schools that we provide even more intensive support to, so that those schools can become demo sites or proof points. And then we can take teachers and principals to those schools and say, this is how you get the most from this product. And we can validate the impact on achievement in that way. So that's a change to Gizmos this year, is everyone still has access, and this quote does include professional development for everyone, but then we have a subset of schools who can opt into what we call a bright spot approach, where they can go deep and really focus on becoming demo sites.
Ms. Burke?
I love Gizmo. My concern is, when principals, will the principals have professional development as well, so that when they go into the classrooms, they will have certain look-fors in mind? And just hearing some principals about so many different programs we've had over the last 4 years before you all came on board, they were not, they needed the desire this professional development. So, because even though Gizmo is there, how do we know that it's being utilized as often as it should be? It can be an issue. We can have lots of resources, and as you stated, teachers have so much to do. But I hope that there is an opportunity from the beginning, or maybe it's already taking place, where doing principals meetings is an opportunity for professional development.
Well, what we're doing in regards to that, you're absolutely right. And again, this is why we've got to ultimately really take a hard look at our full list, and why I've been working with the team to skinny down our tech-enabled list of things. For products like this, there's a few ways we're training folks, so particularly for principals. We have a division-wide PD day next week, and so there will be a dedicated session for this that we encourage principals to come to. Our ITRTs, which are assigned to schools across the division, there's a set of instructional tools that everybody is trained on, and these are one of those in the school day. So they're working with principals to identify time within the school day or within their after-school time to train everyone, and we're messaging that principals need to be there when we do those types of things. And then the demo sites in particular is where we do expect, that's where we want principals to go deeper. So for all of our, for all of our schools, this isn't a huge priority. They simply want teachers to be using it, but we're not insisting that they walk around and insist for this. That's our ITRT should be supporting that, and our math specialist. In a perfect world, if our principals had time, we would say, yes, everyone. But I want to be transparent that we are doing some training at the schools that we expect principals to be part of. But I wouldn't say that we're insisting that every single principal, monitor this every single day in all their math and science classes. I mean, I just, to be realistic, I want to be transparent about the different things they're being asked to monitor.
Yeah. So right now it's an option. They don't have to use the Gizmo.
Well, so let me clarify. Before we decided to re-up this, I took an inventory and asked every principal to indicate, is this something your school currently uses? Is this something your school desires to use? If so, how? School-wide or individual? And on a scale of 1 to 5, how essential is this to your school? And our schools consistently rank this as essential. So I know that they do plan to use it, because I basically said we're not going to buy a district license if everybody's not going to use it.
That's nice they have options professionally.
I believe it's important.
That's interesting.
Ms. Dorr?
My question pertained to exactly what you answered in the last sentence, so I'm really grateful to hear, back to Mr. Young's point about sort of the cost-benefit analysis, making sure we're doing due diligence, and I'm sure it can be tedious to sort of come up here for every $250,000 ask, and frankly, as a board member, it's hard for me to position this in our long list of technology products, as you've expressed. This is just sort of the point that I was going to, Ms. Gibson brought it up earlier, and I just want to underscore, I think, I feel like there's a lot of $25,000, $50,000, $100,000 software items that we just waste money on. Why do we still have Let's Talk? So I know that's not just you, but I
That's
feel
not
like,
like
I just,
That wasn't in my inventory.
Sorry, that's not for you. This is really not necessarily you. It's just a broader point about we're spending a lot of money on like these little one-off things that maybe fly below the radar, et cetera. And I just think we need to get better about it overall as a district, not just you. You're doing a fabulous job at, justifying this stuff, but just generally, we've got to get better about this stuff.
Yeah, no, I just want to jump in here. Couldn't agree more. That's one of the big goals for the budget season this year is to kind of go through all that. I will say to Mr. Simmons' credit the other day in our check-in, he shared with me that we had a software platform that cost, was it $40,000? There's one person in our PS using it. Guess what we don't have anymore? That platform. So the list of those kinds of things is long and complicated, and we are unraveling all of them. I'm confident there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars tied up in things of that nature. As we all know, we have no shortage of needs to spend on, so that is certainly going to be a key priority going into this budget season, which is one of the key foci for us over the next several months.
Yeah, and we are, again, as I said, we start off in inventory. There's essentially an asset mapping process. And so we are definitely doing that for all of those. And we discovered a similar product that we were paying $60,000 for, that there was a similar state product offered for free. And we decided not to renew that through this process. Those are the things that we don't get to share headlines, but those are good things. So again, happy to provide at some point, findings as we complete all of that inventory for instructional products as well.
Ms. Gibson?
So I apologize if it wasn't clear or didn't follow so the $276,000, is that consistent with what was spent last year on the product? Are we growing the program or?
No, this is consistent with current, with the past expenses. It includes site licenses for gizmos and reflexes for K-12. It includes reflex site licenses for all of our elementary schools and then for our middle schools. And it does include a significant amount of professional development that we had days. A lot of these contracts come with professional development days, but those don't really get used strategically, or there's not really days in the calendar to use those without pulling teachers out. And so we've reworked our professional development support to be the equivalent of 40 hours a week dedicated to implementation on this, given the price tag and given the Bright Spots approach. So the company will be providing someone who's actually a former RPS teacher to provide direct support to teachers using the product.
Could you speak a bit to what the reflex math looks like, or these programs? I'm very familiar with reflex math and math literacy in elementary, and I'm just curious to know, how that model applies in the upper grades.
It's very similar in the upper grades as well, and so again, a number of our middle school kids are still, unfortunately, not as fluent on some of those foundational math skills that they need to be. So it's not significantly different from the elementary product. And then the Gizmos thing, if you haven't checked it out, I would definitely encourage you to check it out. It's a very cool product.
Ms. Owen?
I move that we accept the administration's request for instructional purchases for tutoring and software.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Owen and seconded by Ms. Dorr to approve for action request of renewal of instructional software for math, science, and literacy. Any discussion? Call the question.
The tutoring, just to be clear.
I believe that software and tutoring.
Yes, that's software and tutoring. Call the question.
Ms. Dorr?
Yes.
Mr. Barlow?
Aye.
Ms. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Ms. Cosby?
Yes.
Ms. Burke?
Yes.
Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Dr. Savini?
Yes.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Page?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Next item.
The next item is item 6.02, receive for action a recommendation to support the external cost assessment of rebuilding / renovating schools.
This is just a follow-up discussion to the one that we had several weeks ago. I can't keep track given our shifted schedule, this is not our thrash. This is the proposal to work jointly with the city to engage in external evaluation of, in essence, 2 data points for each of our schools: the cost of rebuilding and the cost of renovating up to modern standards. The purpose of which being that we would then have a shared set of numbers that we could advocate against. Based upon some of the work that was done to try to understand the scope of such a project and the potential costs, it's my understanding now that the maximum that each party, that is RPS and the city, would need to put forth is $100,000. And so, again, we can't, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg issue in that we can't put out any RFPs until there's approval. And so that's our best understanding of what the maximum cost for each party would be. And so we're bringing it back.
Ms. Owen?
The city's share would be $100,000 and the school share would be $100,000?
That is the most it would be. I don't know what it would be yet until we were to put out an RFP and actually get proposals back. But our initial exploration suggested that a total of $200,000 would be the most that it would cost.
So what you're asking for is the permission to put out the RFP
Well,
for an external cost assessment of rebuilding and renovating schools.
Technically, I'll say this.
Procurement.
As I understand it, this technically doesn't require board approval. That being said,
Okay.
Given the contentious nature of facilities, I wanted to make sure that we had a consensus from the board to move forward. So this is below the threshold. It is not a capital project, it is a procurement of a service. But nonetheless, I wanted to make sure that there was support from the board before we move forward, given how complicated and politically fraught the facilities question is.
Ms. Gibson?
I would like to motion that we approve starting an RFP to look at the cost with the understanding that the school board would review and approve the RFP prior to submission.
I have a clarifying question. RPS is not, my understanding of how this is presented, is RPS taking over or handling the procurement of this action, or is that a city?
I think, I mean, Ms. Page, you were in the conversation, so I would
Initiating the RFP.
my understanding is, from our last conversation, and, well, this whole project came out of the joint construction team paradigm, where working together, we've been able to accomplish quite a bit. And I think Ms. Page, Dr. Spini, Ms. Owen have all had an opportunity to participate in those meetings and experience that process. And so the thinking was to use that exact same structure. So under the auspices of the JCT, not the city, not RPS, but jointly, to explore this. As to technically who would put the RFP on the street, I think that is a discussion for the JCT. As the Council of Great City Schools has indicated, our procurement processes have some challenges, and so I certainly would have no issue with the city being the entity that puts it on the street, but no RFP would go out without the assent of the JCT, which is equal representation from the city and RPS. So as Dr. Savini and Ms. Page and Ms. Owen can attest, nothing happens at JCT unless there is agreement from both parties, and so that would be the structure overseeing it going forward. So, yeah.
Ms. Crosby?
Because I'm just a little concerned because the number is a lot higher than when we first.
It is higher, based on the further research that was done. So, yeah, but again, nothing would, nothing would move forward without the JCT's approval, and the chair and the vice chair sit on the JCT, so they would have to sign off before we move forward.
So has a line item been identified to support the cost? If you are part of.
I would defer to Mr. Simmons, but my understanding is yes, we would be able to identify those funds if necessary.
The $40 that you said it's
40,000.
40,000.
Yes.
Ms. Gibson?
The motion that I put on the table is, to proceed. I do think that it's important that our whole board review the RFP. In a project such as this, ultimately, what we ask to be bid on is, what we ask to be bid on is the project itself, right? Like, so, I mean, it's not, I mean, to get a price for the schools, it's like, well, what is it, right? And so we want to make sure that we understand what it is that we're actually asking to get pricing on to ensure that, that the number reflects what our facility plan is. And so, there's not like a machine. I mean, I would suspect that the reason why this is now a larger cost is that determining exactly how many square foot, what is the production methodology or the construction methodology, all of those things are going to factor in on the cost. And so I think it will be important just for our board to be in consensus on that prior to the submission of the RFP.
Ms. Owen?
I'm sorry, just trying to understand. You're not supposed to make a motion. So, you want thumbs up, thumbs down? What you looking for?
I mean, I was looking to see if there was general consensus that it is worthwhile to proceed on this front, so that we can do so. Now, I defer to the chair as to how to do that mechanically, but yeah.
So, for consensus, what, so Ms. Dorr had her hand up.
But I think we have a motion on the table, so either we need a second to that motion or not. I personally do not think we need to, personally don't need to review the RFP afterwards, given that we have 3 members of the school board on the JCT and it seems to be working well. So I will not be seconding it or voting for it, and I would give my thumbs up to move forward.
We have a point of clarification here. We have 3 members on the JCT, or we have 3 who have participated?
We have 3 that have participated, and so Dr. Sapina and I are the representation from the board. But Ms. Owen has attended, and those meetings have been noticed that more than 2 board members may be in attendance. So that's how it came about, because Ms. Owen had some questions regarding the schools in her district, so she participated at that time.
And,
So I guess.
And just to clarify, the JCT is not a voting, it's not like how many people do you have, it's like everybody has equal veto power. Like unless there's true agreement and consensus, it doesn't happen, so.
So I guess my point would be if one of us on the board cares about approving the RFP, to just go to the JCT meeting where that happens.
And it's, prior notification so it can be properly noticed, so the clerk can properly notice the meeting. So that's how Ms. Owen attended a couple of meetings. Because she had questions about the school construction with the schools in her district. Ronald?
No, I don't want to suggest that the city doesn't want us to have all of our schools brought up to speed, but we do know that for generations, the city has not really done everything it can to make sure that our schools are taken care of and that we're building new facilities as we need to. So I guess the thing that concerns me about this process and the city being involved in developing an assessment of the needs for our school district is that there could be, and I don't want to suggest that there's nefarious intent from anyone, but there may be an incentive, or maybe it's when it's a call when you give it the benefit of the doubt to one party or the other, that number could be smaller than RPS might expect, and I'm just curious if anyone can speak to that point.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that, but it is not a, it is a well-known fact that there has been conflict between RPS, city, various government entities, but as I shared last time on this discussion, I think the work of the JCT has been quite noteworthy. In fact, if any of the media would like to do a story on it, I'm always told that news is the uncommon thing. Well, RPS and the city getting along and achieving things for kids is the uncommon thing. And I think the work that the JCT did to reconcile accounts led directly to this board's ability to approve emergency facility recommendations that I brought to you, which are having tangible benefits for kids today. My hope is that this process could parallel that, and because there's equal representation and decisions must be made by consensus, we have every opportunity to ensure that this process meets our needs and goes no further. And I think our kids and our families and our city would be well served if instead of us continually retreating to our positions of distrust, and I understand there's good reason for that. This would be a trust building measure so that we could have one set of numbers that we could rally behind and advocate for, particularly as we are generating a lot of enthusiasm and energy around the state legislative strategy to increase funding. So, look, I think, again, well aware of all the politics here, which is why I wanted to bring this to you, but I really do believe the JCT is working well and will ensure that RPS's interests are well taken care of. Again, I would defer to the chair and the vice chair who can speak to the mechanics of that process.
So before we move further, I'm going to speak to the motion. So the motion has failed for the lack of a second. So another historical perspective. In the past, RPS will have one set of numbers, and the city will have another set of numbers. And so with that in mind, the infighting starts. And at the end of the day, we don't get anything accomplished, and our children are always the ones that lose out because of the infighting. So the hopes is with this process, we'll be all on the same page. No one is equal participation, throughout this process. So we both entities equally will have a voice. Consensus to move forward, and the board will continuously be updated through this process. Mr. Barlow.
Madam Chair, can you remind us of the composition of the committee?
So the composition of the joint construction team is Superintendent Darren Simmons, procurement, can't think of her name right now, but,
Betty.
Betty. Procurement representatives, Dawn Summers, the CAO, myself, Dr. Sapini, the school board clerk, Lincoln Saunders, and they have a clerk as well, taking notes. And Barbara Hathaway, I'm sorry. So, and we received the minutes from the weekly meeting. And the minutes are on the board docs. So again, we have an equal voice, equal representation, and we know our history. We know the history of the city. So, the fact that we're making an effort to proceed with this initiative jointly, so that we'll all be on the same page. And just to give you another example, just reconciliation of their accounts between RPS and the city. They had one set of numbers, and we had another set of numbers. And we saw what that was turning into. So, I have consensus to move forward. Okay. Next item.
The next item is 6.03, receive for action and human resources actions.
Good evening, everyone. The recommended Human Resource Department actions for the school board meeting include the nomination of 38 employees, the change of contract of 87 employees, the transfer of 31 employees, the resignation of 35 employees, the return from leave of 9 employees, the furlough of 15 employees, the retirement of 9 employees, the termination of 6 employees, the rescission of employment of 4 employees, the reappointment of 2 employees, and the name change of 4. You should be receiving the agenda and amendment, so did everyone get 2? Tracy, did you pass both that way, or was it both sides? So make sure you take one from each staff, agenda and amendment.
Any questions?
Madam Chair, I move that we accept we approve the Human Resource Department actions and the addendum as well.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Barlow and seconded by Ms. Owen to approve the HR action, including the addendum as received. Any discussion? Call the question.
The motion was made by Mr. Barlow, seconded by Ms. Owen to approve the HR actions with the addendum. Ms. Dorr?
Yes.
Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Ms. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Same.
Ms. Cosby?
Yes.
Ms. Burke?
Yes.
Ms. Owen? Yes. Dr. Sapini?
Yes.
Mrs. Page?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-1. Thank you. The next item is your consent agenda, and 7.01 is to receive for action a resolution recognizing VSBA Bullying Prevention Month. That resolution was on board docs, but it reads as follows: whereas school bullying has become an increasingly significant problem in the United States and Virginia, and whereas over 20% of the youth in the United States are estimated to be involved in bullying each year, either as a bully or as a victim, and whereas an estimated 160,000 students in kindergarten through 12th grade miss school every day due to a fear of being bullied. And whereas bullying can take many forms, including verbal, physical, and most recently in cyberspace, and can happen in many places on and off school grounds. And whereas it is important for Virginia parents, students, teachers, and school administrators to be aware of bullying and to encourage discussion of the problem in the school community. And whereas the Virginia School Boards Association has developed a model policy on anti-bullying to encourage positive behaviors and to eliminate bullying behaviors. Now therefore, the School Board of the City of Richmond joins the Virginia School Boards Association in recognizing the month of October 2018 as VSBA Bullying Prevention Month, with the intention that the issue of bullying and its prevention be discussed in Virginia schools and classrooms during that time.
I move that we approve the resolution as presented.
It's been moved by Mr. Barlow and seconded by Ms. Burke to approve the resolution recognizing the VSBA Bullying Prevention Month resolution. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing that we have none, the resolution has been approved.
The next item is item 8, other informational items, and these items, or documents rather, were on board docs for your review. 8.01 was an update on petty cash and credit cards. 8.02 is information on the Otway Island Trust. And 8.03 is the 2019-2020 budget calendar. The next item is 9, new business.
Just want to remind board members, received an email about trunk or treat in partnership with the Richmond City Sheriff's Office, and RPS is participating in that initiative. So check your emails. Ms. Gibson?
I have two things. One is a question regarding the MOU and the CAP. I was wondering when the CAP is going to be presented to the state. Is that at the October?
Yes, my understanding is it's going to be at the October meeting, correct?
Yes, it's October 8th.
And then the other item I wanted to bring up was a potential discussion item for a future meeting around, I don't know what the right word is, but I want to ensure that our teachers feel encouraged to participate in advocacy at Bread for Ed specifically, and perhaps we can look at the policy as it pertains to teachers and speaking to ensure that there isn't perhaps any conflict, that teachers would feel that it's a political thing, if they would support Red for Ed and by wearing the red in school. I was wondering what we can do to ensure that teachers feel empowered to be able to speak up. This is just a bill for consideration.
Mr. Barlow?
Perhaps we could go a step further and put in place a proclamation in support of Red for Ed.
Fine with me. I've been trying to be exceedingly vocal about support, and where there have been schools where teachers have felt that they were unable to voice their opinions, we have communicated with leadership that they should be able to do so. So the more the merrier. Not sure it requires discussion, but if the board would so choose, glad to endorse the proclamation. Actually go a step further. I was sharing with the chair on Friday when we had the state funding meeting that I would like us to consider taking some steps that would enable our teachers to participate on January 28th, I believe it is, which is the statewide march. It's technically a walkout. So I'll preview, I would like to bring to the board, after we do some thinking around this, potentially turning that into a non-instructional day such that we would enable all staff to participate without causing any undue harm to students during that day, but we need to think through what that might look like in how to support parents, because obviously this would be a shift, but certainly want to do that. And as I shared in my weekly message, we are working to select a date for a statewide march in support of funding a little bit earlier in the season to affect the legislative agenda. And hopefully I'll have some information on a possible date on that front very, very soon.
And so to add to your, the point, Ms. Gibson and Mr. Barlow, what you just stated, the will of the board clerk can look for language surrounding that proclamation and bring it back to the board for adoption. Next
The
item.
next item is closed session.
Chair, pursuant to section 2.2-3711, subsection A, section 1 of the Code of Virginia 1950 amended, I move that the school board of the city of Richmond convene in closed session to discuss prospective candidates for employment and the assignment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of employees of the division, including consideration of the human resources agenda of the state, discipline, and employee matter number 1819-02 and performance of the city school board.
All in favor?
Thank you.
It's been moved by Mr. Young and seconded by Dr. Sneed. You will. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Send